Story 1. I stayed at a Best Western off Interstate 84 and someone had a key. The second time the handle moved, I was already standing in the dark with my back against the bathroom door frame, and I heard the little green click of a keycard reader accepting a card that was not mine. My wife was in my ear on the phone saying my name over and over, asking what was happening, and all I could do was watch the thin bar of hallway light under the door break where 2 feet stood on the other side. I did not scream. I have thought about that a lot since, how the thing you would swear you would do is the one thing your body will not let you do. Let me set it where it started, because the middle of it does not make sense without the front of it. My name does not matter much for this, but I go by Trent. And in the fall of 2019, I was driving a 14-year-old Ford Ranger from Cedar Falls out to a job site outside Boise. The job was a warehouse build-out, drywall, and metal stud framing. 6 weeks guaranteed and maybe 10 if the general contractor liked the crew. I needed it to be 10. My wife Dana and I had a mortgage that was 2 months from being a real problem, and we had a daughter, Rowan, who was 4 and who had just started asking why Daddy had to sleep in his truck sometimes. I did not sleep in my truck if I could help it. But motels off the interstate cost money, and money was the whole reason I was on the interstate. I want to be honest about the kind of man I was going into this, because it matters to how slow I was to understand what was happening. I was not a nervous person. I had worked night shifts on job sites in 3 states. I had slept in half-built houses with no doors on them. I chewed the inside of my cheek when I drove, a habit Dana hated, and by the time I hit the panhandle, my cheek was raw and I had eaten most of a bag of sunflower seeds, and I was thinking about nothing worse than whether the site foreman would dock me if I showed up a day early. I was a tired man in a cheap truck. That was all. The drive had been long and it had been quiet, and quiet is the thing I remember most about the whole approach, how ordinary and gray and uneventful the hours were before any of it. I had left Cedar Falls before dawn with a thermos of coffee Dana had made me, and a cooler with sandwiches she had wrapped in wax paper because she does not trust gas station food. And I had listened to a classic rock station until it dissolved into static, and then to a talk station about crops and futures until that dissolved too, and then to nothing, just the road noise and the wind and the engine for hundreds of miles. I passed through Nebraska in the flat middle of the day, and I remember thinking that the country out there does not look like anything is possible in it, that it is too open, too seen, that bad things need corners. And this had no corners. I was wrong about that, the way people are wrong about a lot of comforting things. The bad thing was waiting for me in a place with a swimming pool that was closed for the season, and a continental breakfast, and a laminated card about towels. I crossed into a stretch of Interstate 84 where the towns get thin, and the exits are mostly a gas station and a grain elevator and nothing else. And the sun went down behind me in the mirror, like somebody closing a door. My plan had been to make Boise in one shot. My plan died around 9 p.m. when the Ranger started running hot, and I had to baby it 45 miles an hour with the heater blasting to pull heat off the engine, sweating in October, watching the temperature needle like it owed me money. There was a town coming up. I will not use its real name because the people there did not do anything to me, and because a couple of them tried to help. I will call it Halberd, which is close to the shape of the real one without being it. The exit sign said gas, food, and lodging. The lodging was a Best Western, 2 stories. The tan stucco and the green trim they all have, a sign up on a pole tall enough to be seen from the interstate, glowing that specific red and blue against a sky that had gone the color of a bruise. There was a truck stop across the frontage road and a diner attached to it. The Best Western sat a little apart at the end of a cracked parking lot with maybe 9 or 10 cars in it, and one long row of rooms facing the lot, and another row you could not see from the road. I remember being glad it was a chain. A chain meant a real front desk, real locks, a real number to call if the truck did not start in the morning. That is a thing I believed at the time, that a brand name was a kind of safety. I have not believed it since. I pulled in a little after 9 p.m. and let the engine tick and cool while I sat there and did the math I did every night on the road. The rate on the little backlit board inside the lobby window said $79. I could see it through the glass. $79 was more than I wanted to spend and less than a tow at midnight, so I went in. The lobby was small and smelled like burnt coffee and carpet cleaner. There was a rack of brochures for a lava tube tour and a raptor sanctuary, both of them faded. Behind the desk was a woman, maybe 60, gray hair pulled back hard, reading glasses on a beaded chain, a name tag that said Colleen. She had a paperback face down next to the register and a little television going with the sound off. She looked up at me the way people at the end of a long shift look at one more thing they have to deal with, and then her face softened, because I probably looked as beat as I felt. "Rough one," she said. It was not a question. "Truck's running hot," I said. I was trying to make Boise. "You won't make Boise tonight in anything that's running hot," she said. "Not this stretch. Nothing between here and Mountain Home you want to break down in." She was already typing. "One night?" "One night," I said. "Maybe two if I have to get the truck looked at." She quoted me 79, and I did not haggle because there was nobody to haggle with, and I gave her my card and my license, and she copied the plate number off a little form I filled out, and I remember I wrote it out and pushed it back across the desk. A, B, C, then the numbers. She looked at the truck through the window and back at the form. Colleen was thorough in a way that I read at the time as small-town nosiness, and understand now as something closer to caution. She had reasons to be careful about who was in her building. I did not know that yet. She pulled a key card out of a little machine, one of the white plastic ones with the hotel logo on it, and she ran it through, and the machine chirped, and a light went green. And she wrote a room number on the paper sleeve with a pen. She started to hand it to me, and then she stopped. It was a small thing. She had the card halfway across the desk, and she pulled it back an inch and looked at the number she had written, and her mouth did something, tightened, and she set that card down and made a new one. "Let me put you in a different room," she said. "That one's got a temperamental heater." "I don't mind a bad heater," I said. I was thinking about the $79 and about being warm. "I mind it for you," she said, and she said it lightly, but she did not look up when she said it, and she ran the second card and wrote a new number on a new sleeve and slid it over. "Room 214. Upstairs. End of the row," she told me. "Quiet up there. Nobody on either side of me this time of year." She circled the little map on the sleeve. "Continental breakfast until 9:30 a.m. Ice machine at the far end. Check out at 11 a.m. The first card, the one she had made and pulled back, she did not throw away. She set it on the counter by the register, off to the side, face down. I noticed it because I notice small things when I am tired, the way you fixate. I did not think anything of it. Why would I? A woman changed my room. People change your room. I have turned that moment over so many times since that it has worn smooth, and I still do not know for certain what she saw when she looked at that first number. I have a guess now. My guess is bad. I got my duffel and my tool belt out of the truck, because you do not leave tools in a truck in a strange lot, and I climbed the exterior stairs at the end of the building to the second floor. The walkway ran the length of the row, open on one side to the parking lot with a metal railing, doors on the other side, each with its little brass number and its peephole and its card reader with the red and green lights. My boots were loud on the concrete. Down in the lot, the truck stop sign buzzed, and a refrigerated trailer somewhere ran its compressor in long cycles, on and off, the sound I would come to hate. Room 214 was the last door but one. There was one more room past mine at the very end. 216, dark, no car under it that I could tell. I tapped the card, and the reader clicked green, and I went in. It was a normal room. 2 queen beds with those quilted spreads, in a pattern designed to hide stains, a television bolted to a low dresser, a window unit under the window, a round table with 2 chairs, the bathroom to the left as you came in, with the sink and mirror outside it, and the tub and toilet behind a door. It smelled like the whole building smelled, carpet cleaner over something older. There was a coffee maker with 2 little pods, and a laminated card about towels and the environment. I threw my duffel on the far bed, the one closer to the window, and I set my tool belt on the table, and I did the thing I always do first in a motel, which is I put the chain on and I turned the deadbolt and I flipped the little swing bar, the U-shaped metal one that folds over. I did all three. I always did all three. Remember that. I called Dana. It was an hour later where she was, and she answered on the second ring. And I could hear the television, and I could hear Rowan not being asleep. And Dana said she won't go down. She wants to know if you found the horses, which was a thing between me and Rowan, that when I drove west I was going to look for horses. And I said, tell her I saw a whole field of them at sunset, which was a lie. I had seen cattle, but it is the kind of lie you are allowed. Dana asked where I was, and I told her a Best Western off the interstate. Truck running hot, safe and warm, breakfast in the morning. And she said good, and I could hear her relax through the phone. That little drop in her voice. We had been married 9 years. I knew the sound of her shoulders coming down. Call me before you drive, she said. Not after you're already on the road. Before, I said. I promise. Before I ate, I did the thing I do in a new room, which is I walked it. It is a habit from job sites. You learn a space by walking it, and in a motel it takes 10 seconds. I checked the bathroom, the tub, behind the shower curtain, which people laugh at until they have a reason not to. I looked in the closet, a little alcove with an iron and a board and 2 extra pillows in plastic. I looked under both beds, out of the same reflex, and there was nothing under them but carpet and a lost sock that was not mine, and a phone charger cable somebody had left, a white one, coiled, and I remember picking it up and thinking about how many people cycle through a room like this, how many strangers sleep 4 feet from where you will sleep, separated only by time. I put the cable on the dresser in case housekeeping wanted it. I checked the window. It looked out over the back row, a strip of dead grass and a chain-link fence, and the dark shapes of the truck stop beyond. And it was the kind of window that opened about 6 inches and stopped on a security catch. Enough for air, not enough for a body. I checked that the window unit worked. I checked the connecting door, because the room had one. A second door on the side wall that led to the neighboring room, the kind with a deadbolt on your side and a deadbolt on theirs. And both have to be open for the door to work. My side was bolted. I turned the bolt to be sure, and it was solid, and I left it. That first night I did everything right. I want that on the record too. Nothing that happened to me happened because I was careless. I checked the connecting door with my own hand. I ate a gas station sandwich sitting on the end of the bed with the television on low, some cooking show, and I fell asleep in my clothes with the lights on around 11 p.m. And I slept like a man who had driven 600 miles. Which is to say hard and dreamless, and I did not wake up until the light was gray in the window and my phone said 7:40 a.m. Nothing had happened. I want to be clear about that. The first night, nothing happened at all. Whatever was wrong with that place did not touch me the first night, and I have wondered since if that is because it was watching, or if that is because the timing just was not right yet. I do not know. That is one of the things you have to live with after, that you never get the whole shape of it. The truck was the reason I stayed a second night, and the second night is where it started. I found a mechanic in Halberd, a one-bay shop off the main drag run by a heavyset guy named Dylan, who diagnosed a failing water pump in about 4 minutes and told me he could have the part by early afternoon and have me back on the road by evening or, more likely, first thing the next morning. That put me one more night at the Best Western. I called Dana from the mechanics lot and told her, and she made a noise about the money, and I made the same noise back, and we agreed there was nothing to do about it. I paid Colleen's replacement at the desk for a second night. Colleen was not on. It was a younger guy now, ball cap, earbuds in one ear, and I paid and went back up to 214 a little before noon to wait out the day. Here is the first wrong thing, and I need you to understand how small it was. When I left that morning for the mechanic, I had done the motel room thing in reverse. Deadbolt back, chain off, swing bar down, and I had pulled the door shut behind me and heard it latch, and I had pushed on it once with my hand the way you do, and it was solid. I am a framer. I hang doors. I know what a latch door feels like under my palm. It was latched. When I came back at noon and tapped my card, the reader went green, and I pushed the door, and the swing bar was thrown. That U-shaped metal bar, the secondary latch, the one you can only set from the inside. It was folded over into the closed position, so the door opened 2 inches and stopped against it. From the inside, in an empty room, with the door locked behind me all morning, I stood there in the walkway with the door open 2 inches and my hand on it, and I felt the first cold thing go through me. And then, the way your mind does, I explained it. I told myself I had thrown the swing bar out of habit when I got up before I left and forgotten, and that I had somehow gotten out the door and pulled it shut without the bar catching, which is not actually possible. The bar physically blocks the door, but at noon on a bright day with a water pump to worry about, I did not do that math. I told myself housekeeping had been in and set it, which also is not possible. Housekeeping cannot set the inside swing bar and then leave, but I told myself that anyway. I reached in through the 2-inch gap and I unhooked the bar and I went in and I set my coffee down and I did not think about it again for a couple of hours. That is the truth. I explained a locked from inside door in an empty room, and I moved on with my day, because the alternative did not fit anything I understood about the world. There was one more thing that afternoon, and it belongs here, in the middle, because it is the kind of thing you only see the shape of later. The connecting door, the one in the side wall that I had bolted with my own hand the first night. When I came back at noon and put my coffee down and started to relax into the story I was telling myself about the swing bar, I walked past that connecting door on my way to the bathroom, and I stopped because the bolt was turned, not open. Turned to horizontal, which on that particular lock was the unlocked position, and I stood there and looked at it, and I remember thinking, plain as anything, I bolted that. I know I bolted that. And then the machine in my head that had been explaining things all day went to work again, and it said, housekeeping, they must have opened it to service the next room. They do that, they go room to room, and it turned the bolt and forgot to turn it back. And that is a real thing that housekeeping sometimes does. And so I reached out and I turned the bolt back to vertical, to locked, and I pushed on the connecting door and it did not move. And I let it go. I let it go. That door connected 214 to 216, the end room, the one with the drawn curtains and the tan Buick. And I had just locked it, and I felt better for locking it. And I did not once let myself finish the thought that if housekeeping had unlocked it from my side, they had done it from inside my room, which meant they had been in my room, which was fine. That was their job. Or it meant someone else had, which was not a thought I was willing to have at noon on a bright day. The room was clean. The beds were made, mine and the untouched one, and there were fresh towels, so housekeeping had been in, which fed the story I was telling myself. My duffel was where I left it on the far bed, my tool belt was on the table. Everything was where it should be, except I had this itch, this sense that the room was arranged, that things were a hair off from where I would have put them, and I could not point at any one thing. My phone charger was plugged into the wall by the far bed. Had I left it there? I thought I had left it by the nightstand. I could not swear to it. You cannot swear to where you left a phone charger. That is exactly the kind of thing that is invisible until you need it to be a fact, and then it is smoke. I spent the afternoon in the room because I had nowhere to be until Dylan called about the truck. I watched television. I texted Dana pictures of nothing, the parking lot, the ice machine, a joke about the raptor sanctuary. Around 3 p.m. I went down to the truck to get a phone cord. I actually did leave in the truck, and while I was down in the lot, I noticed the room at the end. 216, the one past mine. There was a car under it now. An older Buick, tan, a little rust on the rear wheel well, an Idaho plate. The curtains in 216 were drawn all the way, and there was a do not disturb tag on the handle, and I remember thinking somebody's got the same idea I do, holed up waiting for something. A person waiting out a day in a motel is the most ordinary thing in the world. I did not look twice at it. I want to say I felt something, and I did not. It was a tan Buick with a Do Not Disturb tag. There are 1,000 of them. Dylan called at 4:30 p.m. and said the part was in, but he could not get to it clean until morning. Sorry, come by at 8 a.m. and he would have me out by 10. So it was going to be another night after all in the same room, and I called Dana and told her, and she was quiet in a way that meant she was doing the checking account math in her head. And I told her I loved her and I would be home in a week and change with a check that fixed the fall. And she said okay, and Rowan called out something about horses in the background, and we hung up. The second wrong thing happened at dinner. Sort of. I walked across the frontage road to the diner attached to the truck stop because I was tired of gas station food, and I ordered a patty melt and coffee. And while I was waiting, an older man sat down at the counter, 2 stools from me. Work jacket, seed cap, a rancher or a retired one. He nodded at me the way men nod, and we did the small talk you do. Where you headed? Where you from? Truck trouble. And he said he lived out past Halbert on the county road. And then he asked where I was staying, and I said the Best Western, and something happened in his face. Not much. Just a small settling, a downward thing at the mouth, and he looked back at his coffee and he said, "They put you upstairs or down?" "Upstairs," I said. "End of the row." He nodded slowly, and he stirred his coffee that did not need stirring, and he said, "You lock up good over there." And that was it. He did not explain it. I asked him what he meant, and he sort of waved it off. Said the place had had some trouble a while back, break-ins, kids probably, nothing since, and he changed the subject to the Broncos. But he had said it before he caught himself, that first thing, "You lock up good," and it had come out of him the way you say a thing you have said before to other people. I did not push. I was hungry and tired, and a stranger in a diner is allowed to be strange. But he did one more thing before he got up, and I have held on to it, because it was a kindness he did not have to do and did not explain. When he stood and put his money on the counter and pulled his cap down, he paused by my stool on his way out, and he did not look at me. He looked at the door, and he said, "If anything feels off over there tonight, you don't wait around to be polite about it. You get in your truck." And then he went out into the dark, and I heard a diesel start and the wash of headlights swing across the diner glass, and he was gone. "You get in your truck." I thought he was a lonely old man being dramatic. I thought about the $79 I had already paid and how I was not going to sleep in a truck to satisfy a stranger's mood. I ate my patty melt, and I paid, and I walked back across the frontage road in the dark, and the Best Western sign buzzed over me, red and blue, and I climbed the stairs to 214 with a to-go coffee, and I did not think about the old man again until much later, when it was the only thing I could think about. I did all 3 locks. Deadbolt, chain, swing bar. I checked them twice. Not because I was scared, because the swing bar thing at noon had left a little burr in me, and doing the locks twice smoothed it. I got in the far bed with the television on, and I called Dana at 9 p.m. like I did every night, and we talked about nothing. The mortgage, Rowan's preschool, her sister, and it was the ordinary sound of my ordinary life coming through a phone in a room off the interstate. And around 10 p.m. she got tired and I could hear it, and I said, "Go to bed. I'll call you before I drive tomorrow." And she said before, and I said before, and we hung up. I lay in that bed for a while before I slept, and I did not feel safe exactly, but I did not feel hunted either. I felt watched, low and steady, the way you feel watched in a house that is too quiet, and I put it on the strangeness of the day, the swing bar, the connecting bolt, the old man in the diner. I texted Dana a photograph of nothing, the ceiling, and wrote "sleep tight," and she sent back a heart, and I watched the little television and its cooking show and its bright kitchens and its people who were never afraid of anything, and I felt the day drain out of me, and I remember the last clear thought I had, which was that I would be home in a week and change and none of this would matter, that a truck breaking down and a strange old man and a bar that came loose would be a story I told Dana at the kitchen table, and we would laugh at how spooked I got. I actually thought that. I thought I would laugh about it. The refrigerated trailer down in the lot cycled on and off and on, and somewhere under that sound I went under, and the room breathed around me, and 8 feet away in the dark, though I did not know it yet, a door I could not control was already open. I fell asleep with the television on. I woke up because the television was off. I want to be careful here, because this is the part where I have to separate what I knew then from what I know now, and it would be easy to make it sound like I understood. I did not understand. I woke up in the dark, and my first thought was that the television had a sleep timer, and I lay there for a second in that thick middle-of-the-night confusion, and my phone on the nightstand said 2:11 a.m. in that cold white light, and the room was black except for the thin line of the walkway light under the door and the red standby dot on the television, which meant the television had not lost power, it had been turned off. Somebody had pressed a button. That was the thought that came up out of the dark and stood in front of me. Somebody turned off the television. And then I heard the coffee maker. It is a specific sound, a motel coffee maker, that gurgle and hiss when the water heats and pushes through. It was running. On the counter by the bathroom, across the room from me, in the dark, the coffee maker was going through its cycle, and there was the little orange glow of its power light, which had not been on when I went to sleep, and the smell of coffee was starting in the room. Somebody had put a pot in and pressed the button, and the machine was making coffee at 2:11 in the morning while I slept 8 feet away. I did not move. Every part of me went still in a way I did not decide on. I lay on my side facing the room with my eyes barely open, and I made myself breathe slow, and I looked, and I could not see anyone. The bathroom door was open the way I had left it. The far corner by the coffee maker was black. The curtains were closed. The chain, I could see the chain, it was hanging down against the door, not across it, not fastened. And the swing bar, I could not see the swing bar from the bed, but the chain was down, and I had put the chain up. I had put the chain up twice. Here is the thing I did, and I am not proud of it, and I am not ashamed of it. It is just what my body did. I closed my eyes almost all the way, and I pretended to be asleep, and I got my hand under the pillow and around my phone, and I pulled it down slow into the dark against my chest. And I did not turn it on because the light would show. And I lay there and I listened to a coffee maker finish its cycle in a room I had triple locked, and I waited to hear where the person was. For a long time I did not hear anything but the compressor on that refrigerated trailer down in the lot, on and off, and the coffee maker's last dribble and click as it finished. Nothing moved. And I started, God help me, to talk myself back down. I thought, the coffee maker has a fault, the timer glitched, the television has a timer, the chain fell because chains fall, and I almost believed it. I almost sat up and turned on the light and laughed at myself, and then the person by the bathroom breathed. It was not a loud sound. It was a slow inhale through a nose, a wet little catch at the top of it, the sound of a person standing very still and breathing on purpose slowly the way I was breathing slowly. And it came from the dark by the coffee maker, and it was maybe 10 feet from my face. There was a man standing in the corner of my room in the dark. He had made himself a cup of coffee. He had turned off my television. And he was standing there breathing and watching me pretend to sleep, and he knew I was pretending, and I knew he knew, and neither of us moved. I have tried to describe to people what that is like, and I cannot get it across. It is not like fear in a movie. There is no music. It is a total physical certainty that you are being looked at by something that has decided about you, and your body floods with a cold that is not temperature, and your mind goes very fast and very flat at the same time. I thought about Rowan. I thought about the field of horses I lied about. I thought, clear as anything, if I move, he will move. And I thought, the door is on his side of the room, and it was. The door and the light switch and the phone on the wall were all between him and me. And there was one window over the far bed, my bed, with a window unit under it, and the curtains closed, and a 2-story drop to the parking lot. I lay there, and I did the only thing I could do, which was nothing, and I waited, and after a while, a minute or a year, I heard him move, not toward me, toward the door. Slow, careful steps on the carpet, the smallest shift of weight, and I opened my eyes to slits, and I saw him against the thin light under the door. A shape, a man, average, not big, a jacket, a ball cap or a knit cap, I could not tell, and he stood at the door with his back to me for a moment, and then I heard the deadbolt turn, quiet, and the swing bar lift, quiet. He knew exactly where they were in the dark, and he opened the door just enough to slip through into the walkway light, and for 1 second I saw him in silhouette, and then the door closed behind him with the softest click, and I was alone in the room with a full pot of coffee I did not make. I did not move for a long time. Then I got up and I ran to the door and I threw the deadbolt and the chain and the swing bar, and I put my back against the door and I slid down it to the floor, and I sat there on the carpet with my knees up and I dialed Dana. Not 911, Dana, which I have thought about since, that in the worst moment my hand called my wife and she answered thick with sleep. Trent? What's wrong? And I could not get it out at first, and she got scared. She said, Trent, talk to me. What is happening? And I said, someone was in my room. Someone was in the room with me. He just left. He was standing here. And she was awake all the way now, sitting up. I could hear it. And she said, call the police. Hang up and call the police. And I said, stay on. Please stay on. Because I could not stand the idea of the line going dead. And she said, okay, okay. And then she said the thing that put the ice all the way through me, because she was looking at it from outside and I was inside it. She said, how did he get in if the door was locked? And I did not have an answer. And while I was sitting there with no answer, the handle of the door I was leaning against moved. I felt it more than saw it, the door pressing very slightly against my back, and then the small green click of a keycard reader accepting a card, and the deadbolt did not turn because I was holding the door and had thrown everything, but the reader clicked green, which meant he had a card, a working card. A card, the hotel system said, belonged to this room, and he was outside trying it again, and I scrambled up off the floor, and I put my shoulder into the door, and I said into the phone, he's back. He's trying the door. He has a key. Dana, he has a key. And she was crying now and telling me to call 911, and I could not make my hands do two things. So I did the thing that I think saved me. I put her on speaker, and I set the phone on the bed, and I dialed 911 on the room phone, the one bolted to the wall by the far bed, and it connected. 1 ring, 2, and a woman said, the county sheriff's dispatch, what is your emergency? And I said, there is a man trying to get into my room. He has a key. I am at the Best Western off the Interstate in Halberd, room 214. And she was calm. They are trained to be calm. And she said, okay, are the doors locked? And I said, everything is locked and he has a card that works. And she said, stay on the line. Units are on the way, and Dana was on the bed on speaker saying my name, and the handle moved again, slow, testing, and the reader clicked green again, green, green. The system said yes, and the locks I had thrown said no. And I stood there with my shoulder against the door in a Best Western at 2 a.m, holding it shut against the man the building thought belonged there. He tried it 4 times. I counted. 4 green clicks, 4 times the deadbolt caught, and each time the handle went down slow and came back up slow, patient, not panicked, a man with time. And then, between the 4th try and whatever would have been the 5th, headlights swung across the curtains from down in the lot, and I heard the compressor cut out on that trailer, and a diesel engine idling, and the reader did not click again. He was gone. He had seen the lights or heard the truck, and he was gone, and I did not hear him go. That was the thing. I never heard him go. He just was not there anymore. And the dispatcher said, a unit is pulling into the lot now. Can you come to the window? And I went to the window and pulled the curtain back an inch, and there was a sheriff's SUV in the lot, with its spotlight up sweeping the building. And I said, I see them. And I started to shake all at once. My whole body, the way you do after. And Dana on the bed on speaker said, are they there, Trent? Are they there? And I said, they're here. They're here. It's okay. And I do not think I believed it even as I said it. The deputy who came up to 214 was young. and he was thorough, and his name was Owen. It was on his tag. And I let him in, and I stood there in my socks shaking, and I told him what happened. And I could see him doing the thing they do, taking it seriously and weighing it at the same time. And I did not blame him, because when I said it out loud, it sounded like a nightmare. A man made coffee. A man turned off the television. A man stood in the corner and breathed. I heard how it sounded. But then Deputy Owen looked at the coffee maker, and there was a full carafe of coffee in it, still warm. And there were 2 used pods in the little trash can. Not 1, 2. And I had used one the first morning and thrown it away. And housekeeping empties the trash, so there should have been 1 at most, and there were 2. And the second pod was a dark roast, and the machine had come with 2 pods, 1 regular and 1 dark roast, and the dark roast was the one that was gone. He had made himself the dark roast. Owen looked at that for a while, and he stopped weighing it. I watched it happen in his face. He believed me after the pods. There was one more thing Deputy Owen found in 214, and it was the connecting door. He walked the room slow, and he came to the side wall, and he tried the connecting door, and the bolt on my side was thrown, locked, because I had locked it at noon, but he opened it anyway, because a deputy opens things, and behind my bolted door was the second door, the 216 side, and that one, the one I could not control, the one that only opens from the other room, was standing open, wide open, into the dark of 216. So the 2 doors of the connecting passage were one locked and one open, and the only thing between me and that empty room all night had been a single deadbolt that I had turned at noon on a bright day, and felt so good about turning. If I had left it the way I found it, turned to horizontal, it would have opened. He had unlocked it earlier from his side when he serviced his little nest. He had wanted it open, and I had closed it, and I truly think, that is one of the small margins the whole thing turned on, that at noon I turned a bolt I did not understand the meaning of, and it held that one door. And so when he came for me in the dark, he had to use the hallway and the MasterCard and the front door of 214, and that put him in the walkway where headlights could find him, instead of coming through the wall. A deadbolt I turned out of a vague unease is maybe the reason I am telling this, and the nurse from 2016 is not telling hers. I do not know that. I will never know that, but I turn it over. He got on his radio, and he called it in, and another deputy came, older, Sergeant Halloran, and they walked the walkway, and they walked the lot, and the tan Buick was gone from under 216. Gone. And the Do Not Disturb tag was on the handle of 216, and when they got the night guy up from the desk, the ball cap kid, terrified now to open 216 with the master, the room was empty and clean and looked unrented. Because it was unrented, it had not been rented to anyone. The Buick had no business under it. And there was a smell in 216, cigarettes, and something sweet sour underneath, and a single coffee cup, a paper one from the diner across the road, sitting on the windowsill of 216, positioned so that a person standing at it could look through a gap in the curtain straight down the walkway at the door of 214. He had been in the empty room next to mine. He had been watching my door from a room that was not rented, that he had a way into, and when I slept he had let himself into mine, and when I woke he had let himself out, and he had a key card the system said was mine. That was the night. But it is not the whole thing, and the whole thing is worse, and I only got it in pieces over the weeks after, and I am going to give it to you the way it came to me, because the order is part of the horror of it. The key card was the first piece. Sergeant Halloran had the front desk pull the electronic lock records for 214, because those locks keep a log, every card, every open, time-stamped, in the little unit on the door. And the log showed my card, and it showed housekeeping's card, and it showed a third card, that had opened my door at 11:52 p.m. while I slept, and again at 2:13 a.m., and again 4 times at 2:41 a.m. The tries against the thrown deadbolt, and that third card, when they traced its identifier in the system, was a card that had been issued as a maintenance master, and it had been reported lost and deactivated in the summer of 2017. Deactivated 2 years before I ever pulled into that lot. Except the deactivation had never fully taken in the old lock units on the second floor, the units that had never been updated when the rest of the property was budget, always budget, and the card still worked on the upstairs doors, and it had worked on them for 2 years. And somebody knew that, somebody who had that card, somebody who had once had a reason to hold every key in the building. The maintenance man was the second piece. His name I am not going to give even the fake version of, because his family is real somewhere and did nothing, but he had worked at that Best Western for a long time, years. The on-site maintenance and handyman lived nearby, knew the building down to the studs, and he had been let go in the spring of 2017. The reason he was let go was the third piece, and it was the piece that made Colleen pull that first key card back across the desk and give me a different room, and it was the piece the old man in the diner would not say. And it was the piece that reframed everything, every small wrong thing, back to the very beginning. In the fall of 2016, a woman had disappeared from that Best Western. She was a traveler like me, passing through, alone, a nurse driving from a job in one state to a job in another, and she had checked in for one night and never checked out, and her car was found in the lot 2 days later, and she was never found at all. Not then, not since. The maintenance man had been questioned because he was the maintenance man, because he had access to everything, and there had not been enough to hold him. There is never enough. And he had kept his job for a few more months while the county worked it and got nowhere. And then he had been quietly let go in the spring, not charged, just let go. The way you get rid of a thing you cannot prove. And he had turned in his keys, all of them, except the maintenance master he said he had lost, that he reported lost. That got marked deactivated in a system that did not actually deactivate it on the upstairs doors. And the room the woman had checked into in the fall of 2016, the room she vanished from, was 214. It was the number Colleen wrote on that first sleeve out of habit or a bad computer default, the room the system still liked to assign, and it was the number she looked at and pulled back and crossed out, because Colleen had worked there in 2016. Colleen remembered, and Colleen would not put a lone traveler in 214, so she moved me. She moved me to 214. She thought she was moving me out of it. The room she moved me to, the second card, the one she was so relieved to give me, was 214, and I have gone back and forth on this 100 times, and I think what happened is that the computer had the old numbering that a renovation years back had shuffled the room numbers on the second floor, and the desk system and the physical brass numbers on the doors did not fully agree, so the room Colleen thought of as the safe end room was on the doors, the same physical room where the nurse had vanished. She moved me out of it and into it. She was trying to save me, and she walked me right into the one room in that building she was afraid of, and she never knew, and I have never told her, because what would it do? That is the warning I missed, if you want to call it that. Colleen pulling the card back, the old man in the diner saying you lock up good, the do not disturb tag on an empty room, the tan Buick that was the most ordinary thing in the world. There was a man who had lost a job and a life over a woman nobody could find, who still had a key to the second floor of the building where it happened, who still came back, who parked in the lot and sat in a room that was not rented and watched the door of the room where it started, and who let himself in on the nights when the right kind of person was sleeping there, a lone traveler, passing through, somebody nobody local, somebody whose disappearance would take days to even start, somebody driving from one state to another with a wife who was 1,000 miles away and could only listen. I stayed in the lobby the rest of that night. Colleen was not there. It was still the ball cap kid, and he made me a coffee from the lobby machine, and his hands shook worse than mine, and we did not talk much. Around 4 a.m. I called Dylan's shop and left a message that I would be there when he opened. Around 5 a.m. Sergeant Halloran came back inside and sat with me at one of the little lobby tables under the fake plant, and took the long version of my statement. Everything. the swing bar at noon, the connecting bolt, the television, the coffee maker, the breathing, the 4 tries at the door, and he wrote it all in a spiral notebook in careful block letters. And near the end of it, he stopped writing, and he looked at me for a while, and he said, "You had the connecting bolt turned when the deputy checked it?" And I said, "Yes." And he wrote that down, and he underlined it twice, and he did not tell me why, but I saw him do it, and later I understood. He put my truck's plate and my license number and my home address into the report, and he gave me a card with the case reference on it and told me a detective would call, and one did, days later. A woman named Det Reyes, who was working the old case, the 2016 case, and who asked me the same questions again and some new ones, and who was the one who eventually, carefully, without ever quite saying it as a fact, let me understand what room I had actually been in and who they thought had been standing in the corner of it. They never caught him. I need to say that plainly, because everything in me wants to give this a better ending, and there is not one. There was an investigation. I gave a statement that ran to many pages. The logs were pulled and entered into evidence. The county reopened the 2016 case, or said they did, or attached my night to it. The deactivated master was flagged, and the second-floor locks were finally replaced, weeks later, after I was long gone. They knew who they wanted. They had wanted him for 3 years. But wanting is not evidence. And a key card log that shows a deactivated card opening a door does not put a specific hand on that card. And the man was careful, and he was patient, and he had gotten away with worse than a coffee maker. And he got away with this too. Last I knew, he was still living out there somewhere near Halberd, a man in his 50s who used to fix the ice machines, and he had a no-contact order attached to his name and my name that a judge signed, and that means exactly nothing to a man who was never going to knock on my door in daylight in the first place. I got a letter months later at my house in Cedar Falls, official, county letterhead, and it referenced the incident by number, and I am going to give you that number because it is the only hard, true thing I have from that night. The only thing with edges, incident 22904. That is the file. That is where a night that took 10 years off my life lives now. In a cabinet in a county I will never drive through again. Incident 22904. A lone male traveler. Forced entry by deactivated maintenance, master keycard. No suspect apprehended. Connected, pending, to the 2016 disappearance of a female traveler at the same location. Room number redacted in the copy they sent me. Though I know the number, I will always know the number. I finished the drive to Boise the next morning. I did not sleep again that night at all. I sat in the lobby until the sky went from black to that flat gray, and when it was light enough that the parking lot looked like an ordinary parking lot again, and not a place where a man had waited for me, I got my duffel and my tool belt from 214, and I want to say I was brave about it, and I was not. I made the ball cap kid come up the stairs with me and stand in the walkway while I went in and grabbed my things in under a minute and did not look at the coffee maker, and I checked out, and I never went back into that room. And I have never been in a room at the end of a walkway since without my heart doing a thing. Dylan fixed the water pump, and I did not tell him what happened, and I think he already knew, the way the whole town seemed to already know, the way the old man in the diner had known, the way Colleen had known enough to pull a card back across a desk. It was a town that knew and did not say, and lived next to a thing it could not prove, and I drove out of it at 10 in the morning and did not stop until Boise. I called Dana before I drove, like I promised, before, not after, and neither of us said much. We just stayed on the line for the first hour of the drive listening to each other breathe, which is a thing you can do when you have been married 9 years and have both just come through the same night from opposite ends of a phone. I did the warehouse job all 6 weeks, and I went to 10, and I brought home the check that fixed the fall, and Dana and I paid the mortgage down, and Rowan got a good Christmas. And I told her I never did find the horses, which was another lie. A kinder one, because the truth is I stopped looking for anything out a car window on that trip. None of them will ever fully understand why I do not sleep in motels anymore, why I will drive 4 extra hours to sleep in my own bed, why I put a chair under the handle even in a Hampton or a Holiday Inn, why I check the connecting door with my own hand and then check it again, why the smell of motel coffee turns my stomach, why the sound of a refrigerated trailer cycling on and off in a parking lot at night puts me right back on that carpet with my back against a door. Dana was on the phone the whole time. I have not made enough of that. She was in my ear through all of it, 1,000 miles east, sitting up in our bed in the dark, hearing a man try a door she could not see, saying my name. And she has told me since that it was the worst hour of her life, listening, unable to do anything but stay on the line, and I believe her, and I think in a way it was harder for her than for me, because I could put my shoulder against the door and she could only hold a phone. She heard the green clicks. She heard me count them. She is my witness for all of it, the one person on earth who was there without being there, and when I doubt my own memory of it, when it starts to feel like a nightmare I could have dreamed, she is the one who says, no, it was real, I heard it. I heard him trying to get in. Here is what I keep coming back to, and then I will leave it, because there is nowhere else for it to go. He made himself a cup of coffee in the dark while I slept. He put in the dark roast pod, and he pressed the button, and he stood there in the corner of 214 and drank it, or did not drink it, and watched me, a man who had done this before, in the same room, to a woman who was never seen again. And the thing that I cannot get out from under is that he was not in a hurry that whole night, at any point. The way he moved, the way he tried the door 4 times, slow, and stopped, and left. He had time. He had had time for years. He has time now. Somewhere off a county road, outside a town I am calling Halberd, there is a man in his 50s with a key that does not open any door anymore, and a memory of a room at the end of an upstairs walkway. And the county has a file, incident 22904, and the file is closed in the way that things are closed when everyone knows and no one can prove it, which is to say it is not closed at all. It is just quiet, the way that whole building was quiet, the way he was quiet, standing in the corner, breathing, waiting for me to be sure I was alone. Story 2. I kept seeing the same man at the Holiday Inn Express. The last night, I stood with my back against the door of room 410 with the deadbolt thrown and the security latch flipped, and I listened to him breathe on the other side of it. He said my name once, soft, the way you say a name to a dog you are trying to coax off a porch. He said, Wyatt, come on, I just want to talk to you about your sister, and I did not have a sister, I never had a sister, and that was the moment the whole thing turned inside out, and I understood he had never known me at all when we put it in order, because that is the only way it makes any sense, and even in order it does not make much. My name is Wyatt. I was 38 that spring. I service and install commercial kitchen equipment for a company out of the Kansas City area, walk-in coolers and dish machines, and the big convection ovens that go in the back of chain restaurants. And once every 2 years, the state and the manufacturers want you recertified on the refrigerant handling, the reclaim procedures, all of it. That is a boring sentence, and I am sorry for it, but the boredom is the point. I was a boring man doing a boring job. I drove a white cargo van with our company logo on the side, a coffee cup with steam coming off it, which made no sense for a company that fixed ovens, but nobody had ever asked me. I chewed the inside of my left cheek when I was thinking, a habit my wife hated, and I had a raw spot in there most of my adult life to prove it. The certification course was 3 days in a city about 4 hours from home. I am going to leave the city a little blurry on purpose, but it was the kind of mid-sized place that has a downtown nobody goes to after 5 and a ring of hotels out by the interstate where everybody actually stays. The company put me up at the Holiday Inn Express off the frontage road, the tan one with the green sign, 4 floors, the pool that is always closed for maintenance. If you have driven anywhere in this country, you have stayed in it, or its twin. I want to be clear that there was nothing wrong with the hotel. The hotel was fine. The hotel did everything a hotel is supposed to do. What went wrong walked in through the front doors like a paying guest, and for a while I held the door for it. I checked in on a Sunday, a little after 4 in the afternoon. My wife Kayla was 5 months along with our first, and money was the thing that lived in the back of my head all the time then, a low hum. The company had cut the mileage reimbursement that January, and my commission on installs had gotten thinner, and we were doing the math on a nursery and a second car seat, and the fact that Kayla wanted to go down to part-time when the baby came. So I remember thinking, standing in the lobby with my duffel and my laptop bag, that the per diem barely covered dinner if I ate anything but fast food, and I had better keep the receipts straight. That is the kind of thing I was worried about. That was the size of my worries. The guy at the front desk that first afternoon was named Corbin. He wore the little name tag and he had it pinned straight, which I noticed because most of them do not bother. He was maybe 25. Friendly in the way that reads as trained at first, and then you realize the kid actually means it. He got me checked in, gave me 2 key cards and a little paper sleeve, and wrote my room number on the sleeve in pen the way they do so you do not forget it. Room 410. Top floor, end of the hall, he said. Quieter up there. And he smiled like he was doing me a favor, and maybe he thought he was. He asked if I was in town for the plant or the conference, and I said the recertification course over at the training center. And he said, "Oh, nice. How long you here?" And I said, "Through Wednesday." And he said, "Well, if you need anything at all, anything, you just come down and ask for Corbin." I remember thinking, this kid is going to go far. That is exactly what I thought. I thought he was going to go far. The elevator was slow, and it smelled like carpet cleaner. The 4th floor hallway ran the length of the building, and my room really was at the very end, past the ice machine alcove, the last door on the left before the stairwell exit with the red sign over it. The hall had that hotel silence, the kind that is not really silence, the HVAC hum and the little ticking the light fixtures make, and nothing else. The carpet had a pattern on it, dark blue with little gold diamonds, the kind of pattern they pick so the stains do not show, and the wallpaper was that textured tan that looks like fabric until you touch it and it is just plastic, and there was a framed print of a lighthouse on the wall between my door and the next one. A lighthouse in a place that had no ocean anywhere near it for 1,000 miles. I noticed all of that later, over the 3 days, the way you memorize a hallway when a hallway becomes the thing you are afraid of. On the first day, I noticed none of it. I let myself in, dropped my bags, and stood at the window looking down at the parking lot and the frontage road and the interstate past that, the trucks going by with their lights coming on in the dusk. And I called Kayla and told her the room was fine and the drive was long and I loved her, and she told me to eat a vegetable. And I said I would. And she told me the baby had been kicking all afternoon, right up under her ribs, and I put my hand flat on the cold window glass like some part of me could feel it from 4 hours away, and that was Sunday. A good phone call, a boring room, a lighthouse with no ocean. I want you to hold on to how ordinary it was, because that is the material the whole thing was built out of. Nothing came from outside. It all came out of the ordinary, the way rock comes up out of good wood. Monday was the first day of the course. I want to skip past the course because none of the course matters except that it put me on a schedule, and the schedule is what he learned. 8 in the morning until around 4:30 in the afternoon, a lunch break at noon, coffee in the training center lobby. I would come back to the hotel around 5, work out the day's soreness, order something or drive to get it, and be asleep by 10:30 because the course was more tiring than it had any right to be. The first small thing happened Monday evening, and it was so small that I did not even file it as a thing. I came back from picking up a sandwich, one of those chain sub places in a strip by the interstate, and as I pulled the van into the lot, I saw a man standing at the far edge of it, up near the frontage road, by a sedan. Older car, tan or gold, one of those Buicks or Oldsmobiles that all look the same from the 1990s, with a slightly darker replacement fender on the front driver's side so the color did not quite match. He was just standing by the open driver door, one arm on the roof, looking at the hotel. That is all. A man standing by his car looking at a hotel. People stand by their cars. Maybe he was waiting on somebody. Maybe he had just gotten out to stretch after a long drive, which I, of all people, should have understood since I had done that exact thing that afternoon. Gotten out and stood and put my hands on the small of my back and looked at nothing. I parked. I went in. I nodded at Corbin, who was still on shift, and he said, "Get everything you needed." And I held up the sandwich bag like an idiot and said, "Living large." And he laughed like it was funny. And I went up and ate my sandwich in bed, with the television on and the crumbs getting everywhere, and I did not think about the man in the lot again. I texted my brother Bo, who was watching the same ball game I had on, and we did the thing we do where we complain about the bullpen back and forth for 2 innings, and I fell asleep with the phone on my chest and the lamp on. If you had asked me the next morning whether I had seen anyone in the lot, I would have said no. It was that far below the surface. The mind throws almost everything away. It has to. You cannot keep every man who ever stood in a parking lot. The trouble is, your mind and his mind were doing very different kinds of keeping. He was keeping me. I was throwing him away with the sandwich wrapper. Tuesday is when it started to come up. Tuesday at lunch, I drove to a gas station to get a coffee because the training center coffee was scorched. And while I was standing at the counter, I had the feeling of being looked at, that animal thing on the back of the neck, and I turned and there was the tan sedan at the pump, the mismatched fender, and a man in the driver's seat, not pumping gas, just sitting. And when I looked at him, he did not look away fast, the way a normal person does when you catch them. He looked at me for 1 beat too long, and then he looked down at his lap. I could not have told you his face. Older, heavy-set, a ball cap. I remember the cap was a faded red with no logo I could make out. I paid for my coffee and drove back to the course, and I told myself the obvious thing, which is that a gold sedan is the most common car in America, and a gas station by an interstate has a lot of them. And the hotel lot and the gas station are half a mile apart. And of course you see the same generic cars twice in a small city. That is not a pattern, that is just a Tuesday. I chewed the inside of my cheek the whole afternoon session though. My body knew before I did. My body kept the receipt. Tuesday evening is when the name happened, and the name is the thing I keep coming back to because it was the first thing that had no innocent explanation, and I gave it one anyway. I came back to the hotel around 5:15. Different clerk at the desk, a woman older, reading glasses. But Corbin was there too, in the back office behind the desk. I could see him through the doorway on the phone. I went to the ice machine on my floor, because the little bucket in the room is the only good thing about a hotel, and I like ice and everything. The ice machine alcove on the 4th floor is a dead-end nook, maybe 4 feet deep, with the ice machine and a vending machine that only sold water and one kind of chips. I was filling the bucket, the machine grinding and dropping cubes, loud, and behind me a voice said, "Long day, Wyatt?" I turned around, and there was a man at the mouth of the alcove, older, heavy-set, red ball cap. Same build as the man at the gas station, though I did not put that together. In the moment, he was smiling. He had a nice enough smile, the kind of round, friendly face you would trust to watch your bag at an airport. And he said my name, Wyatt. He said it like we knew each other. He was close. That is the thing I did not clock in the moment and have never gotten over since. The alcove was maybe 4 feet deep, and he was standing right at the mouth of it, filling most of the light, so that to get out I would have to pass within a foot of him, and a normal person, a person with no wrong intentions, gives you room, steps back, makes the space easy. He did not step back. He stood there filling the doorway of that little dead-end nook with his round friendly face and his faded red cap, and up close I could see he had not shaved in a couple days, and there was something not quite right about how steady his eyes were, how they did not do the small darting that people's eyes do. They just rested on me, patient, wet, pleased. Here is the thing about your brain in a moment like that. My brain did not go to danger. My brain went to embarrassment. My brain went, oh no, this is somebody I am supposed to know, and I have completely forgotten him. A guy from the course, a guy from a job site years ago, somebody's brother, and now I have to fake it. Now I have to be polite and get through this without letting on that I have no idea who he is. That is where I went. The whole machinery of me was pointed at not being rude, at not embarrassing this man, at keeping the little social contract smooth. And he knew that machinery was there, I think, and used it the way a certain kind of person always knows that a decent man will be more afraid of causing a scene than of dying. So instead of asking how in the hell he knew my name, I smiled back and I said, long enough. And I gave a little laugh, that stupid social laugh, and he nodded like that was exactly the right answer, like we had done a small thing together. And I picked up my ice bucket, cold and sweating in my hand, and I turned my body sideways to slip past him because he still had not moved. And for 1 second, I was close enough to smell him, to cigarettes, and a car that gets slept in, and something under that. And I said, take it easy. And he said, you too, Wyatt, real soft, to my back. And I walked the length of that patterned carpet to room 410, feeling his eyes on me the whole way, and I let myself in and shut the door and stood there, and only then, with the door shut and the bolt not yet thrown, did the cold come up the back of my neck. How did he know my name? I ran through it. My name was not on me anywhere. It was not on the van said the company name. It was not on my clothes. My key sleeve had my room number, not my name. Maybe he heard Corbin say it at check-in, except that was Sunday and this was Tuesday, and I had not seen this man Sunday, or had I? The man in the lot, the man by the tan car. Maybe he was on the course with me and I genuinely forgot him and he saw my name on a sign-in sheet. That last one was the door I walked through. There was a sign-in sheet at the course, first names. We all signed it every morning. He must be on the course. He must have seen my name. I built that explanation, and I moved into it, and I turned on the television, and I texted my brother Bo something dumb about a game, and I did not text Kayla about the man because I did not want to worry her. And also, and this is the part I am not proud of, because saying it out loud would have made it real, and I wanted very badly for it to not be real. I could not settle in the room. The four walls felt too close, and the people kept pulling my eye, that little brass circle. And around 7 I decided the smart thing, the calming thing, was to be around people. So I walked across the lot to the chain grill that shared the frontage road with the hotel, one of those places with the tin signs and the old license plates screwed to the walls, and a bar along one side. I ordered a burger and a beer I could not really justify on the per diem, and I sat at the bar because a man alone sits at the bar, and the bartender was a woman about my age named Rennie, according to the chalkboard that said your server is Rennie, and she was easy to talk to in the professional way good bartenders are, and I let some of it out, not all of it. I said something like, you get a lot of the hotel people in here, and she said all week long, and I said, weird question, older guy, red cap, kind of heavy set, ever seen him? And Rennie wiped the bar and thought about it and said, sure, maybe, a lot of guys look like that, why? And then, and I did not put her up to this, I did not lead her, she looked past me toward the front windows that faced the lot, and her face did a small thing, and she said, huh, is that him? Out there. And I turned on my stool and looked, and across the parking lot, under the light of the pole lamp, was the tan sedan with the mismatched fender, parked facing the grill, and a shape in the driver's seat. Rennie said it before I did. She said, that guy's been sitting there since before you came in. She said it like a fact about the weather. She said, I noticed because he never came in and he never left, and people don't do that. They either come in or they go. And I want you to understand what that did for me. Because up until that second I had been carrying the whole thing alone, and half convincing myself it was a soft spot in my own head. And here was a stranger, a bartender who had no reason to lie and no stake in my night, telling me she had noticed the same wrong thing without any prompting from me. He is real. She sees him too. That was the first time another living person had confirmed him, and I could have kissed her for it. And also, it made the bottom of my stomach go cold, because if Rennie saw it too, then it was not in my head, and if it was not in my head, then it was in the parking lot. I asked Rennie if she would keep an eye on him while I settled up, and she said sure, and she leaned on the bar and watched the tan car the way you would watch a dog you did not trust. And I paid, and by the time I looked back, the car was pulling out onto the frontage road, taillights swinging away, and Rennie said, "Well, there he goes. Guess he got bored," and gave a little laugh that did not have much in it and said, "You want me to walk you out?" A bartender at a chain grill offered to walk a grown man across a parking lot to his van, and I said, "No, I am fine," because that is what you say, and I have thought since that I should have said yes. That saying no was the same reflex as smiling at the man in the ice alcove, the reflex to keep everything normal-sized. I walked back alone with my keys laced through my fingers the way my dad taught me in a different city a long time ago, and nothing happened, and I got up to room 410 and threw the deadbolt. I did not sleep well Tuesday. I kept hearing the ice machine dropping cubes, even though I had not run it again. There was a note under my door when I woke up Wednesday morning. I almost stepped on it going to the coffee maker. A folded piece of paper, hotel notepad paper, the kind with the little green sign printed at the top corner, so it had come from somewhere inside the building, from a room, or from the front desk where they keep the pads. I picked it up and unfolded it, and it said, in careful block printing, in blue pen, "Good morning, Wyatt sleep. Okay." No question mark, no name. Just that. "Good morning, Wyatt. Sleep okay." And under it a little drawing, and I do not know how to make you feel the drawing the way I felt it, because described plainly it is nothing. It was a smiley face, a circle and 2 dots and a curve, the thing every human being on earth can draw, and it made the hair stand up on my arms in a way I still cannot fully explain. A stranger had stood on the other side of my door in the night, close enough to slide paper under it, quiet enough that I never heard, and had wished me a good morning and drawn me a smiley face. And the smiley face was the worst part, worse than a threat would have been, because a threat at least treats you like an enemy, and this treated me like a friend. And there's nothing in the world more frightening than being treated like a friend by someone who is not one. I stood in my socks holding that note for a long time. I told myself housekeeping, maybe, a friendly turn-down thing, except this hotel did not do turn-down, and housekeeping does not know your first name, and housekeeping does not print in careful blue block letters at some hour of the night. I put the note in the outside pocket of my laptop bag, which is a strange thing to do, to keep it, but some animal part of me knew it was evidence before the rest of me would admit there was going to be a case. I still have it. It is in a plastic sleeve in a folder in my house, and I have looked at that smiley face more times than is good for a person. Wednesday was the last day of the course, and I wish I could say I spent it being smart, being careful, watching for the tan sedan, but I did not. I spent it thinking about the exam at the end, because if you fail the recert, you have to pay to take it again, and I could not afford to take it again, and I was ashamed to call Kayla about a smiley face, and I told myself I would deal with it that night. I would tell the desk. I would maybe move hotels, and I put it in the box where you put things you are going to deal with later. That is where my head was. I passed. I got the little certificate that goes in my glove box. I felt good driving back to the hotel Wednesday around 4. I felt loose. I was going to check out Thursday morning early and drive home, and I had gotten through the thing, and I pulled into the lot, and the tan sedan was parked 3 spaces from where I usually put the van. Empty. Nobody in it, but parked and settled like it had been there a while. I sat in my van with the engine ticking as it cooled, and I looked at it for a long minute, and then I made myself get out and walk close, past the trunk, close enough to look in the windows, which was either brave or stupid, and I still cannot decide. Mismatched fender, gold body gone chalky the way old paint goes. A little pine tree air freshener hanging from the mirror, gone pale from age. Fast food bags on the passenger floor. A folded road atlas on the seat, with the cover worn soft. The kind of car a man lives out of when he is on a long errand. And on the dash, and this is the detail that turned my stomach and sent me walking fast for the lobby doors. A pair of binoculars. Just sitting on the dash, angled up toward the building, toward the upper floors. Compact ones, black, the rubber worn smooth on the grips. There is no innocent reason for binoculars angled up at the fourth floor of a highway Holiday Inn Express. There are birds, I suppose. There are always birds, if you need there to be. I did not need there to be. I knew what he had been watching through them, and it had a room number, and the number was mine. I went inside, and Corbin was at the desk, and I want to describe how I felt about Corbin at that exact moment, because it matters later. I felt relieved to see him. He was the friendly one, the one who had said, "Ask for me if you need anything," and I needed something. I went up to the desk and I said, "Hey, this is going to sound strange," and he leaned in like he was ready to help, and I said, "There is a guy who seems to know me, older guy, red cap, and I do not think I know him, and I saw him a couple times now. Is there any chance he is a guest here?" And Corbin's face did this thing. I have thought about Corbin's face for a long time. At the time I read it as concern. Now I read it as calculation. His eyes went down and to the side for just a second. Then he came back up with the concern arranged on top, and he said, "Oh, I mean, I can't really give out guest information. You know how it is. But I can definitely keep an eye out. Do you feel unsafe?" And the way he said, "Do you feel unsafe?" was gentle, and it made me feel like maybe I was overreacting, like maybe I was a nervous guy making a thing out of nothing. And I said, No, probably nothing. Just weird." And he said, "I totally get it. Travel makes everybody a little paranoid." And he smiled, and I let it go, because a nice young man in a name tag had smiled at me and told me it was probably nothing. He was the one telling the man where I was. I did not know that yet, but he was the reason the man always knew. I want to slow down here on Wednesday night, because Wednesday night is when it stopped being a series of small things and became one continuous thing, a rope pulling tight. I went up to room 410 around 5. I did my usual, changed clothes, and I decided I was too rattled to drive out for food, so I would eat whatever was in the vending, which was chips, or I would order a pizza to the lobby and go down for it, and I chose the pizza. I called it in, and while I was waiting, I was at the window and I watched the tan sedan, and around 6:15 a man came out of the hotel, out the front doors, red cap, heavy set, and walked across the lot and got in the tan sedan and did not drive away. He came out of the hotel. He had been inside the hotel. Not a guest, according to Corbin's careful non-answer, but inside anyway, in the lobby, in the breakfast area, on the floors, walking the halls of a building where I was sleeping. And then he went and sat in his car with his binoculars and did not leave. I called down to the desk. Corbin answered. "Chipper, front desk, this is Corbin. I said it is Wyatt in 410. That man is in the parking lot right now. The one I mentioned. Tan car by the frontage roadside. Can you see him?" And there was a pause. And Corbin said, "I can't really see the lot from here, but I'll take a walk in a bit." And I said, "Please, thank you." And I hung up, and I want you to notice that I still trusted him. I still thought I had an ally at the desk. I had told the fox exactly which hen house. My pizza came, and I went down to the lobby to get it, and the lobby was bright and normal, the breakfast area chairs stacked, the coffee thing gurgling, a family checking in with a stroller, and Corbin was gone from the desk, and the older woman with the reading glasses was back, and she handed me the pizza, and I said, "Is Corbin around?" And she said, "Oh, he went on his break, hun." And something about that landed wrong, but I could not say why. And I took my pizza upstairs. I did not eat much of it. Around 9 that night, and this is the part where a normal person is fully alarmed, and I am 9/10 of the way there and still holding on to the last tenth, there was a knock at my door. Not the housekeeping kind. 2 knocks, spaced out, patient. I went to the peephole, which is the thing you do, and the peephole was dark. not a face I could not identify. Dark, the way it goes when somebody is standing close enough to the door and to the side, out of the fisheye, or when somebody has a thumb over it, which is a thing I did not know people did until that trip, and now I know it, and I wish I did not. I stood there with my eye to a black circle, and my heart going, and I said, through the door, "Who is it?" And a voice said, real friendly, real warm, "It's just me, Wyatt." And I did not open the door. I want that on the record. I did one smart thing that whole trip, and it was that I did not open the door. I said, "Who is it again?" And this time the voice, still friendly, said, "Come on now," and there was a little laugh in it, and then the door handle moved. The lever handle went down, slow, all the way, and pushed, and the deadbolt held, and I had thrown the deadbolt out of ordinary habit, and I have never in my life been so grateful for an ordinary habit. The handle came back up, and then nothing, and then, so quiet I felt it in my teeth more than heard it, footsteps going away down the hall toward the ice machine and the stairwell. I stood there in the dark of the entry hall with my back flat against the wall next to the door, not in front of it, next to it, because some old instinct told me not to stand in front of a door. And I listened to my own blood going in my ears. The footsteps had gone, but I did not trust that they had gone far. I thought absurdly about the window, and I went and looked at it, and it was 4th floor over a concrete lot with no balcony and no ledge, and it did not even open more than 4 inches, because they build them that way now. And I understood in a flat, calm way that there was exactly one way out of room 410, and it was the door. And the door had the man on the far side of it, or had, and the room I had thought of for 3 days as my safe place. The boring beige box I retreated to, I now saw for what it truly was, which was a trap with a nice bedspread. I had been sleeping in a box with one door, and I had let a man learn the door. My hands were doing a thing I had never felt them do. A fine, fast shake I could not stop, and I noticed I had bitten clean through the raw spot in my cheek, and there was the copper taste of blood. And none of it felt like it was happening to me. It felt like I was standing a little behind myself watching a man be afraid. I put my ear near the door, not touching it, and I heard nothing. And then I heard, far off, the ice machine kick on, and grind, and drop. That sound I had been hearing in my sleep for 2 nights. And I do not know to this day whether he ran it standing there in the alcove 20 feet from my door, or whether the machine cycled on by itself the way they do, and not knowing is its own small permanent splinter. I called the front desk with my hands shaking, and the older woman answered, and I said, "There is a man trying to get into my room. Room 410, top floor. Please send somebody. Please call the police." And she said, "Oh my, okay, let me get my manager." And I said, "No, call the police." And she said, "Okay, hon, stay put." And I stayed put, and I dragged the little desk chair over and jammed it under the handle, tilting it back on 2 legs the way you see people do. And it does nothing, really. A determined man goes through it, but it felt like something, and in that room feeling like something was worth a great deal. And I called Kayla. I need to tell you about Kayla on the phone, because Kayla is the second person who was there in the way that matters. She was 4 hours away and 5 months pregnant, and she could not do a single physical thing to help me, but she was on the line, and she was real, and she believed me. And when you are alone in a room at the end of a hall with a black peephole, somebody believing you is not nothing. She picked up, and I must have sounded the way I felt, because the first thing she said was, "What's wrong? What happened?" And I told her, fast, the name, the car, the handle, and I could hear her sit up in bed. I could hear the change in the room on her end, and she did not say, "You're overreacting." She did not say, "It's probably nothing." She said, "Are you locked in?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Did you call 911? And I said, "The front desk is calling." And she said, "No, Wyatt, you call 911. You, right now." I'll stay on the other line, call them, and click back to me. And I did what she said because she was the only person in the whole thing telling me to do the obvious right thing. I hung up on Kayla, and I called 911. I told the dispatcher the hotel, the room, the man, the handle on the door. The dispatcher was calm in that flat professional way that is somehow the most reassuring thing in the world in the moment. And she said units were on the way and asked me to stay on the line and stay in the room with the door locked, and I did. And while I was on with her, I heard out in the hall another door and voices, and I went to the peephole again, and it was clear now. I could see the fisheye stretch of the hallway, and there was a hotel worker out there, a young guy in the polo, not Corbin, a night guy, standing kind of uncertainly in the middle of the hall looking toward the stairwell. And I called through the door and I said, "Did you see him?" And the kid said, "See who?" And I said, "The man." And the kid said, "There's nobody up here, sir." And that is the exact moment the floor dropped out from under the whole thing, because the kid was standing between my door and the stairwell, and he was telling me there was nobody there. And I knew there had been somebody there 90 seconds ago. And for one horrible swimming second, I thought, maybe I am the crazy one. Maybe there is no man. But there was a man. The police proved there was a man, in a small way. And Kayla had heard my voice, and Rennie had seen the tan car sit for an hour, and the handle had gone down. I held on to the handle going down. When everything else is trying to convince you that you imagined it, the empty hallway, the polite night clerk telling you there is nobody there, your own tired, frightened mind offering you the easy exit of, maybe I made it up, you find the one physical fact and you close your hand around it. The handle went down. Slow, all the way, and pushed, and the bolt held. That happened. A body I could not see put its hand on my door and tried to come in. No amount of empty hallway takes that back. I waited for the police with my phone in my hand and the dispatcher's voice going in my ear, that steady, flat kindness, telling me they were 4 minutes out, 3 minutes out, stay in the room, keep the door locked. Are the lights on? I turned every light on. I sat on the floor with my back against the foot of the bed, facing the door, because I could not stand to have the door behind me, and I could not stand to stand in front of it. And the floor felt more solid than the bed somehow, more real, and I watched that black peephole go clear and dark and clear again, as the hall lights did, whatever hall lights do. And every time it went dark, I stopped breathing until it came clear. The police came, 2 officers, and they were decent, and they were also, I understood even then, limited. I opened the door to them only after one held his badge up to the peephole and said, "Through the door, City Police, sir, we got the call." And even then, I opened it with the chain on first, and looked at the strip of them before I let them all the way in. They were young, both of them, and they had that steady heaviness cops carry into a room, and one of them looked at the chair, still tilted under the handle and the sweat on me, and did not say anything smart about it, which I was grateful for. And they walked the 4th floor, down to the stairwell, into the ice alcove, flashlights out even with the lights on, the way they do. The tan sedan was gone from the lot by the time they arrived, and of course he had gone down the stairwell and out and driven off while the front desk was getting the manager, while I was on the phone learning that the machinery of help moves at exactly the speed a calm man can drive away from it. One officer took my statement in the hallway, writing in a little notebook of his own, and I told it in order and heard how thin each piece sounded on its own. A man knew my name. A man was at a gas station. A car sat in a lot. A handle went down. And he wrote it all without once making me feel like a fool. And the other officer talked to the night clerk, the polo kid, and then went down to look at cameras with the manager, who had come in from home in a fleece jacket with his lanyard still on, blinking, apologizing to everyone for something he did not yet understand was partly his desk's fault. Here is what the cameras gave us, and here is where the shape of the whole thing finally showed itself. The manager and the officer came back up, and the officer had that careful look cops get when they have information and are deciding how much of it helps you. He said the hallway camera on the 4th floor had caught a male subject, older, heavyset, ball cap, at my door at approximately 9:02 p.m. So there was the man, on camera, real. I felt something unclench in my chest just from that, from a stranger in a uniform confirming I was not insane. The subject was at my door for a little under 2 minutes, and then left via the stairwell. The lobby camera had him coming in earlier, around 6, and the officer said, and here his voice changed a little, and going behind the front desk area at one point, briefly, talking to the desk clerk on shift, talking to the desk clerk behind the desk, the night clerk, the polo kid, said he had just come on and did not know anything. The clerk in the footage at 6 was Corbin. The officer did not make an accusation. Cops do not, on night 1, off a hallway camera. He said they would want to talk to the day clerk, that it was possible the subject had asked the clerk questions, that people did sometimes give out more than they should without meaning harm. He gave me an incident number and I wrote it in my phone. It was incident 22471. He told me to check out in the morning and if I felt unsafe to switch hotels. And he told me they would file the report and if the man made contact again to call immediately. And that was the extent of what the night could do. A man had tried my door and left, and no crime you can easily charge had quite finished happening, and the machinery of help had shown up and done its honest small amount and gone back into the night. I did not sleep. I sat up with the chair under the handle and the deadbolt thrown and the security latch flipped and every light on and the television turned low for company, some infomercial, a man selling a blender to an audience that laughed too much, and around 1 in the morning I did the thing I should have done days earlier. I sat there and I actually tried to remember, where did this man come from? Because a stranger does not fixate on a boring HVAC guy for no reason. Fixation has a seed. Somewhere in my past I must have done a thing to this man, cut him off in traffic, taken a parking spot, shorted him at a counter, said something in a checkout line, some small ordinary friction that he had carried and grown and watered until it became a reason to drive 4 hours and slide a smiley face under my door. So I went looking. I chewed my cheek raw, and I went back through the months and then the years, the job sites in a dozen towns, the gas stations, the parking lots, the diners, every stranger I might have brushed against and forgotten, and I could not find him anywhere. I could not find the seed. And that scared me almost more than the handle had, because a reason, even a stupid reason, even a reason I was ashamed of, would have been something I could hold, something with edges, something I could have apologized for or explained away. Instead, there was nothing. I had done nothing to this man. I did not know this man, and he had crossed 4 hours of interstate for me anyway, and stood outside my door and said my name like a lullaby. And I lay there at 1 in the morning understanding for the first time that the thing that had chosen me was not connected to anything I had done, that it had no door I could close because I had never opened one. And that is a specific kind of terror they do not have a good word for, the terror of being wanted very badly by someone for no reason you will ever be allowed to know. I checked out at 6 the next morning, before the free breakfast even started, before the coffee thing gurgled to life. Different desk clerk, thank God, not Corbin, a tired woman who did not know me from anybody and did not care why I looked the way I looked. I asked her to walk me out to my van, and she looked at me like I had asked her to lend me money, and then something in my face made her decide it was easier to just do it. And she stood in the lobby doorway with her arms crossed and watched me load my bags, which was as far as she was willing to go. And it was enough. It was another person's eyes on the lot, and I have learned since that another person's eyes are most of what safety even is. I put my bags in the van in the gray light with my head on a swivel, checking the frontage road, checking the row of parked cars, checking the mouth of the parking structure across the way, where the shadows did not lift even in daylight. No tan sedan. I pulled out onto the interstate and I drove the 4 hours home, with the mirrors doing more work than the windshield, watching every gold and tan car that came up behind me. My heart doing a little dive every time until I could see the front fender and confirm it matched. And I stopped for gas exactly once, at the biggest, brightest truck stop I could find, and I stood where the cameras were and I filled the tank fast and I got back on the road, and I did not see the tan sedan. and I got home a little after 11 in the morning, and Kayla met me at the door in her robe with her hand on the curve of her belly, and she held on to me for a long time in the doorway. And I stood there and shook a little and did not tell her yet how bad it had gotten, and over her shoulder I looked at the quiet street I had lived on for 6 years, the neighbor's basketball hoop, the recycling bins, and I thought that was the end of it. A bad trip. A weird man. Over now. I was home. Home was a place a man from 4 hours away did not know how to find. That is what I thought. I was wrong about that too, but not in the way I feared. And the way I was actually wrong turned out to be worse. It was not the end of it, and the reason it was not is Corbin, and the reason I know about Corbin is that I could not let it go, and I made some calls. I filed a follow-up with the department that had the incident number, and I got eventually a detective, a woman, Det Aguilar, who actually called me back, which I have learned is rare and precious. She had pulled the hotel footage and talked to the hotel, and she told me, carefully, the way they tell you things they cannot yet prove in court, what it looked like had happened. Corbin, the friendly clerk, the one who was going to go far, had a side arrangement, not with my man specifically, with a habit. He was the kind of desk clerk who could be talked into things. A guy would come in, say he was meeting a friend, a relative, describe them, ask was so-and-so staying here, what room, and normally a clerk says no and means it, but Corbin was soft. Corbin liked being liked. Corbin liked being the helpful one, and if you were friendly enough and told him a warm enough story, Corbin would tell you. The detective's read was that my man had come in that first Sunday or Monday, seen me check in or seen the van, gotten a name from somewhere, maybe from Corbin himself. Said he was an old buddy of mine planning a surprise, asked what room, asked how long I was staying, asked what my days looked like, and Corbin, being helpful, told him, room 410 through Wednesday, comes back around 5. The whole schedule. The man did not have to be a mastermind. He did not have to be clever. He just had to be friendly to a friendly kid who thought he was doing a nice thing for two old friends. That is how he always knew where I was. That is how he knew the name before I ever complained to him about a man knowing my name, which is the detail that finished me when I finally understood it. Because when I went down to that desk Wednesday afternoon, scared, and asked Corbin, was there a guy who seemed to know me, an older guy in a red cap. Corbin already knew exactly who I meant. He had talked to the man. He had told the man my room and my hours. And he stood there behind that counter with his name tag pinned straight and looked at me, being afraid, and told me it was probably nothing. Travel makes everybody paranoid, and he did it, I think, not out of cruelty, but out of the exact same softness that had made him tell the man in the first place. The deep need to smooth every moment over, to be liked by whoever was standing in front of him, to make the discomfort go away. He was not evil. That is almost the worst of it. He was weak in the most ordinary way a young man can be weak, and my safety fell into the gap that weakness made. There was no magic in any of it. There was a 25-year-old in a pin-straight name tag who wanted to be the good guy for everybody at the counter. The sad older man planning a surprise for his old friend and the nervous guest in 410 both, and he could not be the good guy for both of us at once, and he did not have it in him to choose. So he told each of us what would make the moment easiest. And he handed a stranger the keys to me, one warm, helpful sentence at a time. I do not know what finally happened to Corbin. The detective said the hotel was handling it internally, that he had been let go, that it was hard to make it a crime, what he did, telling a friendly man a room number. I believe her. It is hard to make a lot of the worst things a crime. Most of the doors that get left open for the worst things get left open by people who only wanted to be helpful. But none of that told me the part I actually needed, which was who the man was and why. And that came last. And it came sideways. And it is the reason I still check the lot before I get out of my van 5 years later at every hotel in every city. De Aguilar got a plate off the frontage road camera, partial and a make, and ran down the tan sedan, and it came back to a man I am going to call by the name she gave me, which meant nothing to me then and means too much to me now. He was 59 years old. He lived 2 hours from the hotel and about 6 hours from me, in a different state entirely, in a little house he had lived in his whole life. He had a minor record, nothing violent, trespass, a menacing complaint from an ex-neighbor, the kind of file that describes a man who has been sliding sideways out of the ordinary world for a long time. And he had, the detective told me, a sister, a real one, who had died about a year before, and after she died he had gotten worse, and he had gotten an idea. The idea was that a man had wronged his sister years ago, a man he had built up in his mind out of an old grievance she had once told him about a boyfriend or a boss or a landlord. The detective was never sure, and I do not think he was either by the end. A man he had never actually met, whose face he only half knew from a photograph she had shown him once at a kitchen table a long time before, and that he had lost somewhere in the years since. And after she died, and the detective said it was cancer and it was slow, and he had nursed her through the last of it alone in that little house. After she died, this man he had never met became the thing he was going to fix. It was the last thing his sister had left him. In a way, a wrong to right. When you have nothing and no one, and a grief with no bottom to it, a task is a mercy, even a task built out of nothing, even a task that ends at a stranger's hotel door. He was looking for the man. He had been looking for him for months, up and down the Interstate corridor, in the parking lots of the chain restaurants and the equipment suppliers and the hotels where men like that would stay, because his sister had said, years ago, at that kitchen table, that the man who wronged her drove a white company van and worked on restaurant kitchens, on the coolers and the ovens, and carried a clipboard and had a way about him. The detective told me most of this in the flat voice they use, and then she paused, and she said the thing that I did not want and could not give back, which was that in the man's car, when they finally searched it, there was a spiral notebook, and in the notebook were pages of small, careful block printing, the same printing as my note, and it was a log, dates, plates, descriptions of men in white vans he had followed and watched, and decided one after another were not the man after all. Pages of them. And then near the back, fresher ink, a page that started with my company's name and the coffee cup logo drawn by hand, and my plate letter by letter, and Holiday Inn Express and 410, and my schedule laid out in a neat column. Comes back around 5, gone by 8, course through Wednesday. And at the bottom of that page, underlined twice in the block letters, my first name and the words IT is him. I drive a company van. I work with restaurant kitchens. There are, I would guess, a couple thousand men in this part of the country who could fit that description, and he found me because I was the one who checked into the Tan Sedan's field of view on the wrong Sunday, and once Corbin gave him my name and my room and my schedule, the machinery of his idea did the rest. He decided I was the man. I was not the man. I could not have been the man. The wrong he was avenging predated my whole career. But you cannot argue with an idea like that, and he never gave me the chance to, because he never actually wanted to hear me. When he said, through my door, that he wanted to talk to me about my sister, he meant the sister he had assigned me, the sister I did not have, the story he had built, where I was the villain of a life that had nothing to do with mine. That is the part that does not let go of you. I was not chosen for anything I did. I was chosen for a van and a job title and being visible on the wrong afternoon, and a helpful kid at a desk, and a dead woman's old grievance secondhand through a grieving brother's collapsing mind. I could have been any of 2,000 men. I happened to be the one in his headlights. They did not catch him cleanly. I want to be honest about that because it is the true shape of these things, and the tidy version is a lie. For a while nothing happened at all. I would call Ded Aguilar every couple weeks, and she would be kind and she would tell me the truth, which was that the case sat where cases sit, that a hand on a door handle and a notebook full of other men's plates was not the kind of thing that moves fast, that until he did something they could name with a number, he was a sad man in a tan car, and not much else the law could hold. I went back to work. I went out on my route in the white van with the coffee cup on the side, and every hotel lot I pulled into I sat for a minute before I got out and read the parked cars. And I still do, and I will until I die. I put a wedge alarm in my travel bag, the little rubber kind you shove under a door that shrieks if the door moves, and I have used it every single night away from home since, in every town, and Kayla learned not to ask why. There was a warrant, eventually a menacing charge, an attempted burglary that was hard to make stick because a hand on a door handle is a small thing to build a case on, and there was a no-contact order that De Aguilar helped me file, which is a piece of paper, and I want to be plain about what a piece of paper is worth against a man who had already crossed 4 hours of interstate for a stranger. It is worth exactly as much as his own decision to obey it, and not 1 ounce more. He was picked up months later, in another state, in another parking lot, outside another hotel, having done a version of the same thing to another man in a van, another man he had decided was the man. And I do not know what happened to that one, because you lose the thread once you are no longer the one it is happening to. Last I heard, he did a short stretch and there was talk of a competency evaluation, and then the thread went dark. The no contact order sits in a file. He knows my name and my face and what I drive, and for one trip exactly where I slept and when. Corbin gave him that and cannot take it back. So here's the only thing I know that is worth passing on, and I learned it the hard way at the end of a hallway with a black peephole. The friendly one at the desk is not your friend. He is a door, and the only lock on that door is a rule he has already decided to be too nice to keep. Do not give your name, your room, or your hours to a smile. And when the handle goes down and a warm voice on the other side of it says your name like it loves you, understand that it is not you it wants. It is a story it has already written, and you are only the man who wandered into the part. Story 3. I took the last room at a Motel 6 off Interstate 90. The lock on the door was the cheap kind, the button in the knob and a chain that any grown man could tear out of the frame with one good pull, and at some point past 2 in the morning I heard him try it, not knock, try it. The knob turned a 1/4 inch against my hand where I was holding it, and on the other side of that hollow door a man I had talked to twice that night stood breathing, and I remember thinking, very clearly, that I had made a mistake I could not take back. I want to say I understood then how close I was. I did not. That came later, on a Tuesday, from a television bolted to a wall in a break room 3 states away. Let me tell it the way it happened. My name is Travis. I was 34 that year, and I ran cable and low-voltage wiring for a contractor out of Billings, which meant I lived out of a Ford half-ton with a topper and a toolbox that took up the whole bed. That fall, we had a run of commercial jobs strung out along the interstate, warehouses and a couple of new hotels going up at the exits, where there had been nothing but sagebrush and a gas station 5 years before. I was pulling long days, and the company put us up when the drive home did not make sense, but the per diem was thin, and my ex-wife had the kind of lawyer who found new reasons to call me every other month. So I ate a lot of gas station food, and I stayed at the cheapest places I could find. That is the whole reason I was there. Money. It always comes down to money. It was a Thursday in late October. I had finished a pull at a distribution center near a town I will call Rel, which is not its name, off Interstate 90 in that flat brown stretch where the wind never quits and the mountains sit so far off they look painted on. It had been a long day. We had run 3 home runs of Category 6 through a ceiling that was already half closed up, on our backs on scaffold with the dust coming down, and my shoulders had that scraped feeling they get when you have had your arms over your head for 9 hours. I was tired in the way that makes you dumb, is the honest thing to say. Tired in the way that makes a man take the easy read of everything because he does not have the extra in him to take the hard one. The plan had been to drive back toward the next site and sleep in a bed I had already paid for. Then the truck started running rough about 20 miles out, a stumble and a buck under load, and the check engine light came on solid, and I did the math a working man does. If I pushed it and the truck died on the interstate at night, I was looking at a tow, a hotel anyway, and a day lost. If I got off at the next exit and found a room, I could look at it in the morning with light and a parts store open. $200 was $200. A tow at midnight on the interstate was $400 before anybody touched a wrench, and the ex's lawyer had just sent a letter about revisiting the number, and I lay awake nights adding and subtracting a life that no longer added up to much. So the exit made sense. Everything I did that night made sense. That is what I keep running into. Every choice was a reasonable choice, and reasonable choices are exactly what a man like that counts on. So I got off at the exit. For Rel, there was the usual cluster. A truck stop with the diesel pumps lit up white, a shuttered steakhouse, a Motel 6 with the sign up on a pole so tall you could see it from a mile back, that red and blue lettering, the 6 the size of a man. I pulled in under the awning at the office a little after 9 at night. I had a habit back then, still do, of cracking my knuckles one hand at a time when I was working a problem. My ex used to hate it, told me it sounded like somebody stepping on a bag of chips. I was doing it in the truck, sitting there, looking at the office window with the light on and the little bell you could see through the glass, cracking my right hand knuckle by knuckle, thinking about the $400 and some in my checking account and the transmission. I was praying it was not. The office smelled like burnt coffee and floor cleaner. There was a rack of brochures nobody had touched since the Clinton administration, a bowl of individually wrapped mints, gone soft in their wrappers, and a kid behind the counter who could not have been more than 22. Name tag said Bennett. He had the wide-awake, slightly hunted look of somebody working a shift alone that he did not love. Behind him, a little television was playing a rerun with the sound off. I asked if he had a room. He said he had a few, and told me the rate, and I did the flinch a man does when the number is more than he wanted, but not enough to sleep in the truck over. I put my card down. He ran it, and it went through, which was its own small relief, and he slid a key across the counter, an actual metal key on a green diamond fob with the number stamped into it. Room 19. Ground floor, he said. Around the far side, past the ice machine. Last one before the fence. That should have been fine. It was fine. It was a motel off an interstate on a cold night, the most ordinary thing in the world. There was one other person in the office when I checked in. He was standing over by the coffee setup, a tall man, maybe 50, in a canvas jacket and a ball cap with no logo on it, holding a paper cup he was not drinking from. Clean shaven, soft in the middle the way men get, but big through the shoulders still. He had a face you would forget on the street, and I mean that as the plainest description I can give, a face that did not catch on anything. When I came in, he had looked up and given me a nod, friendly, the kind strangers give each other in a place like that, two men out on the road at the same sad hour. I nodded back. That was all. Except that while Bennett was running my card, the man in the canvas jacket said, from over by the coffee, "Rough night to be out." "That you're forward under the awning?" I said. Sounded like it was missing, he said. "The way it come in. You lose a coil pack, they'll do that. Buck under load." He smiled. He had good teeth. Too good almost, the whitened kind. "You a working man, I can always tell. Toolbox in the bed." I said something about how it was probably a coil. Yeah, I was going to look at it in the morning. Because he was right, that was the thing. A coil pack would do exactly what my truck had been doing. It was a normal thing for one man who knew trucks to say to another. I have gone over that first exchange more times than I can count, and I still cannot find the seam in it. It was friendly, it was competent, it was the kind of thing you would forget by breakfast. Except that a man who knows trucks stands at the window and watches yours pull in and listens to it miss and reads the toolbox in the bed and puts it all together into a picture of you before you have said one word. And most men do not do that. Most men waiting on their coffee at 9 at night do not build a stranger out of the sound of his engine and the load in his truck bed. I did not think that then. I thought, there is a guy who likes trucks. I have known 100 of them. My own father was one. It is the most harmless thing a man can be. A man who likes trucks, and that is what made it such a good coat to wear. I took my key and I said goodnight to Bennett, and I went out to move the truck around to the far side. In the mirror backing out, I saw the man in the canvas jacket standing in the office doorway with his coffee, watching me go. Just watching. I told myself he was looking at the truck. Men look at trucks. Room 19 was the last unit on the ground floor of the long, low wing, past the ice machine that hummed and dropped a load of cubes every so often with a sound like somebody spilling gravel, and past a stairwell up to the second floor. Beyond my room was a chain-link fence, and behind the fence a field that ran off flat and black to nothing. There was a light on a pole in the parking lot that buzzed and flickered, one of those sodium lamps going bad, so that the whole scene had a sick orange pulse to it, bright, dim, bright. I want to describe the room because I have thought about it so much. 2 beds with brown covers, a table, a chair, a television, a heater unit under the window that rattled, carpet the color of old coffee, worn to the backing in a track between the door and the bathroom where 1,000 men had walked the same 6 feet. A picture screwed to the wall over the bed, a barn, crooked. The kind of picture that is screwed to the wall because otherwise people take it, which tells you something about a place. The bathroom fan came on with the light and did not turn off, a low grind that went on the whole night. The window had those heavy blackout curtains on a bent rod, and the curtains did not quite meet in the middle. There was a gap maybe 4 inches where the parking lot light came through in a bar across the floor. I noticed it and did not do anything about it. I want to be fair to the room, because it was not a bad room. It was a clean enough, tired enough, ordinary enough room, the kind I had slept in 100 nights of my life without a single thing happening, and that is exactly why I had my guard down. You do not walk into your 100th cheap motel room braced for the worst. You walk in thinking about a shower and whether the television gets anything and how early you have to be up. The horror of it, if there is horror in it, is how completely normal it all was right up until it was not. I dropped my duffel on the bed by the bathroom and I plugged my phone in and I called my brother Nathan because I had told him I would let him know I got in okay. He was the one relationship in my life that year that did not cost me anything. He lived over in Bozeman with his wife and a baby, and we talked most nights, 10 minutes, nothing important, which is the only kind of talk that matters. I told him about the truck. He said, coil pack, probably, same as the stranger had. And I felt a little dumb flare of, I already know that. And then I told him a guy in the office had said the exact same thing. And Nathan laughed and said, everybody's a mechanic. We talked for a while. He put the phone up to the baby so I could hear her breathing, which sounds like a stupid thing, but it was the best part of my day most days. Then he had to go, and I said I would call him tomorrow when I knew about the truck, and we hung up. I went out to get ice. I did not even want ice. I think I wanted to move, to shake off the drive. The ice machine was maybe 40 feet from my door, back toward the office end, and I took the little plastic bucket and I walked down under that pulsing orange light. The man in the canvas jacket was standing by the stairwell. He was just standing there, at the bottom of the stairs, in the dark part where the light did not reach, and when I came around he did not startle, and he did not pretend to be doing something. He looked at me and he smiled and he said, 19, right? I stopped. I had the ice bucket in my hand. I said, sorry? 19, he said again, and he tipped his head toward my end of the building. Saw the kid give you the key. Last one on the end. That's a good one, actually. Quiet. Nobody on the one side of you. He said it like a gift he was giving me, like a man who knew the property. I said, yeah. He seemed quiet, and I went to the ice machine and I filled the bucket, and the whole time my back was to him and I could feel him there, and I told myself, he is a guest. He is bored. He is one of those men who talks. God knows, I had met 100 of them at job sites, the ones who latch on because they are lonely and cannot read that you are not. That is what I made him. A lonely man who talks too much. It is a generous read, and it is the one that let me sleep, so I took it. When I came back with the ice, he was gone. The stairwell was empty. I did not hear a door. Here is the first thing that lodged in me, the first splinter. Back in the room, sitting on the bed with the television on low, I got to thinking about what he had said. Nobody on the one side of you. He was right. My room was the last, and on my far side was only the fence and the field. But how did he know nobody was on the other side of me, the 18 side, the room between me and the ice machine? For him to know that, he would have to know that 18 was empty, and there was no way to know a room was empty just by looking at a door, unless you had checked. I sat with that, and then I did what I always do, which is I explained it away. Maybe the light was off in 18 and the curtains were open and he had glanced in. Maybe he had heard Bennett say something. Maybe he did not mean it that literally, and I was a tired man off an interstate reading tea leaves in a cheap room. I turned the television up a little and I did not think about it, or I made a good show to myself of not thinking about it. I should tell you about the parking lot, because it is part of it. There were not many cars. My Ford around the far end, a minivan with a car seat in it up by the office, a sedan, and a work van, white, no windows in the back, no lettering, parked nose out in the spot right across from the stairwell, which is a small thing, nose out, except that everybody else had pulled in nose first the way you do at a motel. And a van parked nose out is a van somebody wants to be able to leave from in a hurry. I clocked it the way you clock things and file them. I did not know then it was his. I lay on the bed with the television going. One of those late shows where a man in a suit says things and a crowd laughs, and I did not hear a word of it. I was doing the thing I do, running the truck through my head, the coil and the parts store hours and the money, and under that, quieter, running the man in the office. Nobody on the one side of you. I would get almost to sleep, and the sentence would surface again, and I would be awake. I told myself to knock it off. I told myself a tired man alone in a strange town will make a monster out of a lonely stranger every time, that this was the oldest trick my own head knew, and that in the morning I would be embarrassed. I believed that. I wanted to believe it more than I have wanted to believe most things, because the other belief did not have anywhere good to go. I slept some, not well. The heater rattled, and the ice machine spilled its gravel every 40 minutes or so, and the bad light pulsed against the gap in the curtains, bright, dim, bright, so that even with my eyes closed I could feel it change. There was a stretch, and I do not know what time it was, where I came half awake with the certain feeling that the bar of light across the floor had gone dark for a second, the way it does when something passes between the lamp and the window, when a person walks by close to the glass. I lay there with my eyes open and my heart going, and I waited for it to happen again, and it did not. And after a while I decided it had been a dream, or a moth, or the bad lamp doing its dying flicker, and I turned over. Somewhere around midnight I got up to use the bathroom, and I stood at the window for a second and looked out through the gap. He was in the parking lot, standing between the white van and the stairwell, in the dark, doing nothing, not smoking, not on a phone, not loading anything, just standing, facing the building, facing more or less my end of the building, a shape you would not even see if you did not already know the shape of him. The light pulsed, and I saw the pale smear of his face turn toward the rooms, and then the light dimmed, and he was a column of dark, and when it came back up he had turned a little, and I could not tell anymore if he was looking at my room or the stairs or nothing at all. I stepped back from the gap. My heart was going. And even then, even with my heart going, the voice in me that keeps the peace said, he is a guy who cannot sleep, standing in a parking lot, and if a cop rolled through right now, the cop would see nothing, because there is nothing. A man is allowed to stand outside. I got back in bed. I put my phone under the pillow where I could reach it. I lay there, and I did an inventory of the room in the dark, the way you do when part of you has already decided something the rest of you will not admit. The door with the button lock, and the chain, The window with the gap and the cheap glass and the heater unit under it that I could maybe shove aside if I had to go out that way, and the fence beyond it, and the black field beyond that with nothing in it for miles. No house light, no road light, nowhere to run to even if I ran. I thought about the truck, around the far end, too far, past the stairwell where he had been standing. I thought about the phone under my pillow and whether it would even find a signal out here at the edge of a town like this, and I did not check, because checking would have meant I thought I might need it, and I was not ready to be a man who thought that. I did not sleep for a long time, and I told myself that not sleeping was the coffee I had not had and the truck I was worried about, and I almost believed it. Almost is the word that has followed me around ever since. I almost believed it. I almost stayed. I almost let a man carry towels to my door. Almost is the whole distance between me and that map on the television. Morning fixed everything, the way morning does. The light came up gray and ordinary. The field behind the fence turned out to be stubble and a few cows way off, and the whole night felt like the kind of nonsense a tired brain makes. I went out and the white van was gone. See? I told myself. Gone. On his way. A traveling man who kept odd hours. I felt almost embarrassed. I looked at the truck, pulled the coil packs one at a time, and found the second one cracked hairline, right where he had said it would be, which I did not want to think about. And I told myself again that any man who knew Fords would guess a coil on that engine with that stumble. It was not witchcraft, it was the most common failure there was. There was a parts store in Rel that opened at 8. I called Nathan and told him the diagnosis, and he said, good, cheap, fix. And I said, yeah. And I almost told him about the man in the parking lot, and I did not, because in the morning light it sounded like nothing, and a man does not call his brother to tell him nothing. Here is where I want to be honest about the shape of it, because the way these things go in the movies is not the way they go. There was no moment where a door slammed and the music changed. It was slow. It was a series of small wrongnesses, each one explainable, and the explaining is the trap. Every single thing that man did, I explained. That is how I stayed calm. That is also how I nearly did not leave. I went into Rel for the coil pack. The parts store was on the main drag, which was 3 blocks of the usual. A bank, a diner, a bar with the neon off, a hardware store, a laundromat with 2 of its letters dead. It was the kind of small town that runs on the interstate the way a barnacle runs on a ship. Everything in it either aimed at the people passing through or long since given up on them. The guy behind the counter at the parts store knew the part before I finished the sentence, pulled it off the peg, rang me up, told me it was a 10-minute job if I had the ratchet, and I said I had the ratchet. And that was the most normal human exchange I had had in 12 hours, and I did not want to leave it. I got the part and a coffee, and I sat in the diner because my back was tight from the bed and I wanted 20 minutes off my feet. The diner smelled like bacon grease and burnt coffee, and it was half full of old men in caps, and it was the most reassuring place in the world. And I sat in a booth by the window and drank coffee I did not need, and let my shoulders come down off my ears for the first time since the office. And through the window of the diner across the street, parked at the curb, was the white van. Nose out. Now, a white work van in a small town is the most common vehicle there is. I know that. I told myself that, sitting in the booth with my coffee going cold. Every plumber and drywall guy in the county drove one. It did not have to be his. There was no lettering, which was a little odd for a contractor, but not unheard of. I could not see a plate from where I sat. I made myself stop looking at it, and when I came out 20 minutes later it was gone, and I got in my truck and drove back to the Motel 6 to change the coil pack in the parking lot where I had room to work, because the diner lot was tight and the light was better at the motel, and, if I am honest, because I had already paid for another night I had not decided yet to use, and part of me wanted to be near the room in case I decided to stay and finish paperwork before the next site. That was the decision that mattered, though I did not know it was a decision. I went back. I had the hood up and the first coil out when a voice behind me said, "Told you, coil pack." I did not jump quite. I turned around with the socket wrench in my hand, and there he was, The man in the canvas jacket, standing maybe 8 feet back, with his hands in his pockets, rocking a little on his heels, smiling that good teeth smile. He had a way of being suddenly close that I did not like, a way of covering ground quiet. And the white van was back, parked across the lot, nose out. I said, yeah. Second one, cracked. They go in pairs sometimes, he said. Heat cycles. You want a hand? I got a full set of metrics in the van, better than whatever you're running. He tipped his head toward the white van and took a step toward it, toward me, like the offer was already accepted. And this is the thing I keep coming back to, because it was such a small hinge. If I had said sure, I would have followed him to that van, to the back of that windowless van, in a mostly empty parking lot, on the far end away from the office, with my hands full of tools and my head down over a fender. I did not say sure. I said I was good. I had what I needed. Thanks, though. Not because I was afraid. I want to be clear about that, because it would be a better story if I had been brave, and I was not. I said no because I am the kind of man who does not like to owe a stranger a favor, who does not want a talker standing over his shoulder while he works, who wanted the job done and the guy gone. Small, ugly, ordinary reasons. They are the reasons I am alive. He did not push. That is worth saying. He did not push at all. He just said, suit yourself, easy as anything, and he leaned against the fender of the truck 2 spots down and watched me work, and he talked. He talked the whole time. And the talk is where it got bad, slow, the way water gets into a boot. I have thought a lot about why I did not just tell him to move along. I had it in me. I am not a small man, and I have told plenty of guys on plenty of job sites to give me room. But there is a rule you learn without ever being taught it, which is that you do not want to be rude to a man for no reason, because being rude is admitting you are afraid. And admitting you are afraid to a man who has done nothing is its own kind of crazy, and I did not want to be crazy. I wanted to be a normal guy fixing his truck who a talker had latched onto. So I gave him the little grunts and the yeahs you give a talker, and I kept my head down over the engine, and I made myself small and busy and polite, which is exactly the wrong thing, which is the thing a sheep does. And some animal older than me knew it and could not make my mouth do anything different. He asked easy questions, is the thing. Not one of them, on its own, was anything. Where you headed? How long you been running low voltage? You do this route much? Where you stay when you come through here? This place? Or you got another one you like? Nice night for it, if it don't rain. And I answered them the way you answer a talker, half paying attention, giving up a little piece here and a little piece there, and only later laying it all end to end. Did I see that every single question had a use, that he was not making conversation, he was taking inventory, he was finding out how often I came through and where I slept and whether anybody knew my route and how long I would be alone on it. And he was doing it in the voice of a bored, friendly man killing time, and I was handing it to him, piece by piece, glad to have someone to fill the silence. He asked where I was headed. I said up the line, another job. He asked what company. I told him, because why not? It is on the side of a truck for anybody to read, except my truck did not have the company name on it. It was my personal truck, so there was no way for him to have known, and I had not offered it before. He asked if I was married. I said I used to be, and he made a sympathetic sound and said something about how the road was hard on that, and then he said, kids? And I said no, and he said, brother mentioned a baby though. I thought I heard a baby. The socket wrench stopped in my hand. I had talked to Nathan the night before, on the phone, in my room, with the door shut, with the window shut. I had held the phone to hear the baby breathe. I turned around slow. He was still leaning on the fender, still smiling, looking off across the lot at nothing, like he had said the most casual thing in the world. And the peacekeeper in me went to work faster than it ever had, because the alternative was standing in a parking lot in the middle of the day realizing something I did not have the room to realize. Maybe I had said it to Bennett, maybe I had been on the phone outside for a second by the ice machine and not remembered. Maybe he heard a baby somewhere, another guest, and my brain was stitching it to me. Maybe. I built the maybe as fast as I could and I climbed inside it. I said, "You must be thinking of somebody else." He looked at me then, direct, and the smile did not change, but something behind it did. A kind of patience. A man who has all the time in the world and knows it. "Must be," he said. I put the new coil in with my hands not quite steady, and I dropped a bolt and had to fish it out of the cross member, and the whole time he stood there, and he did not offer to help again, and he did not leave. When I closed the hood, he was still there. I got in the truck and turned it over, and it caught clean and ran smooth, no stumble, fixed, and I remember being grateful for that engine because it meant I could leave, except I had already paid for the night, and I had paperwork, and, God help me, the sun was up, and he was a chatty stranger, and the story I had built was holding, and I told myself I would go into the room, do my invoices, and if I still felt weird, I would just drive to the next town and eat the cost of the room. A reasonable plan. A plan a reasonable man makes. I did not want to be the guy who flees a Motel 6 in daylight because a lonely man knew about coil packs. I went inside and I bolted the door, the little button and the chain, and I sat at the table with my laptop and I could not focus. And after a while I got up and looked through the gap in the curtains, and the white van was still there and he was not in it, and I could not see him anywhere, and that was worse. When I could see him, I knew where he was. When I could not, I felt him everywhere. I called Nathan. It rang and he picked up, and I said, keeping my voice down for no reason I could have named, "Hey, weird question. Last night on the phone, did you hear anybody around me? Like, was I outside?" He said, "You were in your room. You said you were in your room. Why?" I said, "No reason. Just a guy here said something about a baby and it threw me. Probably heard it from somewhere." Nathan was quiet a second, and then he said, in a different voice, the voice he used when he was about to be a big brother even though he was younger, "Travis." "What guy?" I told him. All of it, out loud, for the first time. The office, and the coil, and the stairwell, and the parking lot at midnight, and the van nose out in 3 places, and the baby, and saying it in order out loud to another person was the first time it stopped being a string of maybes and started being a shape. Nathan did not laugh. That is the thing I will always love him for. He did not say I was tired or paranoid. He said, "Get in the truck. Right now, you already fixed it. Get in the truck and drive to me. I don't care about the room." And I almost did. I stood up to do it. I had my keys in my hand, and then there was a knock at the door. Not the man. A woman's voice. "Hey, sorry, hi? Front desk sent me? The kid?" I looked through the peephole, and there was a woman, maybe 40, in a hotel polo, holding a stack of towels, standing back from the door the way housekeeping does. I told Nathan, "Hold on." I opened the door on the chain, the 2 inches the chain allowed, and she said, kind of embarrassed, that the guy at the desk asked her to bring towels to 19 and check the heater because a guest had reported it rattling. Her name tag said Lorena. She looked ordinary and tired and real, and behind her the parking lot was bright and empty and the van was there across the way. I did not report the heater. Bennett had gone home hours ago, and this was a day shift kid I had never seen at the desk when I glanced at the office earlier. So who reported the heater in my room? Who told the desk that room 19 had a rattling heater? I had told exactly one person the night before that the heater rattled, and it was not the desk, it was on the phone, to my brother, in this room, with the door shut. I have never, in my life, made a decision as fast as I made the next one. I told Lorena, "Thank you, I was actually just checking out, and I did not take the towels," and I shut the door. I heard her say, "Okay," muffled, and her cart squeak away. I put Nathan back to my ear and I said, "Quiet, I'm leaving now." He said, "Good, stay on the phone." I threw the laptop and my toothbrush and the charger into the duffel without unplugging anything right, yanked the charger out of the wall, grabbed my key fob and my truck keys, and I went to the door, and I put my eye to the peephole first. He was there, standing in front of my door, close, filling the fisheye of the peephole so that his face was huge and warped and pale. And he was not smiling now. He was just looking at the door, at the peephole, like he knew I was on the other side of it, with my eye pressed to it. And then he reached out, slow, and I saw his hand come up out of the bottom of the frame, and the knob turned. It turned a quarter inch and stopped against the bolt. I had my hand flat on the door without deciding to put it there, as if I could hold it, as if a hand could hold anything. The knob turned back. Then it turned again, harder, and the whole door moved in the frame. That flex a cheap hollow door does, and I could hear him breathing. I swear I could hear him breathing through an inch of hollow core door. Slow and even, not a man in a hurry. A man who had done a thing like this before and was not rushed by it. Into the phone, so low it was barely sound, I said, "Nathan, call 911. He's trying my door." I heard Nathan swear, and I heard him moving, and I heard him tell his wife to get his phone, the other phone, and I stood there with my hand on the door and my heart trying to come up my throat, and I watched the knob and I thought, the chain will not hold, the button will not hold. If he wants in, he is coming in. And the window is the same cheap glass, and there is a fence behind me and a field, and there is nowhere. And then, over his shoulder, out at the edge of what the peephole would show me, warped and small, a car pulled into the lot. Just a car. The sedan I had seen the night before, coming back from wherever it had been, an old couple by the look of the two gray heads through the windshield, pulling into a spot up by the office, headlights swinging across the lot as they turned in. And he stopped. He turned his head, the huge warped head in the peephole, to look at the headlights, and he took his hand off my knob, and he stepped back, one step, two, easy, unhurried. A man who had just been walking by, and he put his hands in his jacket pockets, and he actually strolled, down toward the ice machine and out of the frame of the peephole like he had somewhere ordinary to be. Because there were people now, because there were witnesses now, two old gray heads getting out of a sedan 100 feet away, fumbling with a room key, not looking at him at all, not knowing they had done anything. That is all it took. That is the whole margin I lived on, two strangers coming home late. I stood there with my back against the wall beside the door for what felt like a long time and was probably 10 seconds, listening. And I heard nothing. No footsteps, no van door, nothing. And the nothing was worse than a sound would have been, because it meant he was being quiet, and a man is only quiet when he means to stay near. I made myself look through the peephole again. The lot was empty of him. The old couple were gone into their room up by the office. The bad light pulsed, bright, dim, bright, and I knew, the way you know a thing in your body before your head will say it, that if I stayed in that room until dark, until that couple was asleep, and the office kid was nodding off over his phone, and the lot was empty again, he would come back, and next time there would be no headlights. I did not wait to understand it. I opened my door and I went out fast toward my truck, the far way, keeping the building on my right and the lot open on my left so I could see the duffel banging my leg, the phone still at my ear with Nathan saying my name over and over. The old couple looked up at me, and I must have looked like something, because the man put his arm out in front of his wife. I got to the truck. I got the key in. My hand was shaking so bad it took 2 tries. I looked up once, over the hood, and he was standing down by the ice machine in the shade of the stairwell, watching me, hands in his pockets, and he lifted one hand and gave me a little wave, friendly, like a man seeing off a buddy, like the first nod in the office. And that wave, I think about that wave more than anything, because it was not a threat. It was worse than a threat. It was a man telling me he was not worried, that this was nothing to him, that I was one of a number of things, and the number did not much matter. The truck caught. I backed out too fast and clipped the curb, and I did not care. And I drove out under that tall red and blue sign onto the frontage road, and up the ramp onto Interstate 90, heading east toward Bozeman with my hands locked on the wheel. And I stayed on the phone with Nathan the whole 140 miles. and I did not see the white van behind me, and I watched for it the entire way. I want to say I felt safe once I hit the interstate. I did not. Every set of headlights that came up behind me and sat there too long turned my stomach to water, and twice I got off at an exit and sat in a gas station lot with the doors locked and the engine running until whatever it was went past, and then got back on. Nathan stayed on the line and mostly did not talk, just said he was there every couple of minutes so I would know the call had not dropped. And one time his wife's voice came on soft in the background asking if I was okay, and Nathan said not now, and I heard the baby fuss and settle, and I drove toward that sound for 140 miles like it was a light on a hill. My hands hurt when I finally shut the truck off in his driveway. I had been gripping the wheel so long they had cramped into the shape of it, and I had to work them open one finger at a time. And I sat there in the dark of his driveway with the porch light on and his front door opening, and I could not make myself get out of the truck for a minute because getting out meant it was over, and I did not yet believe anything was over. I want to tell the aftermath plainly, because the aftermath is where you find out how little the machinery of the world can do with a thing like this. A county deputy met me at Nathan's house that evening. His name was Sergeant Ostrander, an older guy, careful, decent. He sat at Nathan's kitchen table and he wrote it all down, and I could hear how it sounded as I said it. A man was friendly to you. A man knew about a coil pack. A man was in the parking lot at night. A man knew you had a brother with a baby. A man tried your door. And when I got to that last part, he leaned in a little, because a man trying your door is a crime. That is attempted entry. That is something. And he asked me, was I sure the knob turned? And I said I had my hand on it, and I felt it turn. And he wrote that down. But here is what the aftermath is made of. I did not have his name. The motel had the man on file under whatever card he had used, and Sergeant Ostrander called it in, and the day shift kid pulled the record, and the name on the room, 2 doors down, the 17 side, was a name that turned out to be a dead man's from another state, a stolen identity, a card that came back to a fraud file already open in 3 jurisdictions. The white van had no plate anyone had written down. I had not gotten it. Nobody had. There was no camera on the far wing, only one over the office door, and it had caught him in the office the first night. A ball cap and a canvas jacket and a face turned half away. A man of average height and average build, the most useful description in the world for finding nobody. Lorena remembered him too. The housekeeper. When the deputy got to her, she went pale, Sergeant Ostrander told me, and sat down because she remembered that a man had stopped her that afternoon by the linen cart, friendly, and asked if she was headed to the far wing, and offered to carry towels down to 19 for her since he was going that way, and she had almost let him because he seemed nice and her cart was full. And the only reason she had not was that a supervisor had chewed her out the week before about letting guests behind the cart. That was the report. That was who reported the rattling heater in my room, not the desk. Him. He had gone to the desk himself and mentioned it, so that a woman with towels would knock on my door and I would open it. And I did open it on the chain, and it was her and not him, because the one thing he could not control was which of them got there first. And the chair had not been under the knob, and the woman with the towels was the whole reason I was standing up with my keys in my hand when I finally understood. Bennett, the night clerk, remembered him. That mattered to me more than it should have, that somebody else had seen him and felt something. When Sergeant Ostrander tracked Bennett down, the kid said the guy had checked in 2 nights before me and asked twice, casual, which rooms were occupied and which were empty. Said he was a light sleeper and wanted quiet. Bennett said he had thought it was a weird thing to ask, but people ask weird things. Bennett said the guy had been in the office the night I checked in and had watched me the whole time and had asked, after I left, which room the kid had put me in. And Bennett, tired, not thinking, had told him 19. He told me all this later on the phone, Bennett did, because he tracked me down through the deputy, and he wanted to say he was sorry, and he was almost crying. This 22-year-old kid, saying he did not know He just told the guy in the room he did not know. I told him it was not his fault. I meant it. He could not have known. None of us knew anything. That was the whole nature of the thing. It moved through the world telling everybody nothing. There was an incident number. Sergeant Ostrander gave it to me on a card. Incident 21449. He said I could reference it if anything else happened. If I saw the man again, if the van turned up. Nothing else happened. The van did not turn up. The name was Smoke. A detective from the county called me twice in the following weeks. A woman, Det Pruitt. Thorough and kind and plainly out of road. And the second time she called, it was mostly to tell me there was nothing new. That they had a description that fit 10,000 men and a stolen name and no vehicle and no crime committed except a knob that turned, and that I should not blame myself for not getting a plate. Most people did not. And that if I remembered anything else, anything, to call, I could hear in her voice that she believed me, and that believing me did not help either of us. I filed the card in the truck. I stopped sleeping with the light off for a while. I put a wooden dowel in the track of the slider at my apartment, and I put a chair under the knob at motels after that, every time, a habit I still have. And slowly, the way it does, it got quieter. Nathan and I did not talk about it much after the first month. A near miss is only a near miss. Nothing happened, is the thing people would say, kindly, meaning it as comfort. Nothing happened to you. There was a run of weeks in there where I did not do well. I would get to a motel after dark and sit in the truck in the lot for 20 minutes reading every other guest, before I would go in, watching who came and went, clocking every van, every man alone, every friendly nod from a stranger at an ice machine turning my stomach over. I got so I could not stand a man being nice to me for no reason. My whole life I had been raised that a friendly stranger was a good thing, that you nodded back, that you helped a guy with a coil pack, and now the friendliness itself was the thing that scared me. The openness, the ease, because I had seen where that ease could live and what it could be wearing. I would lie in whatever room I had gotten and put the chair under the knob and the dowel in whatever track there was, and I would run it all again. The office, the stairwell, the baby, the heater, the knob turning against my hand. And I would get to the part where the headlights swung across the lot and I would have to get up and drink water from the tap and stand there in the dark bathroom until my heart came back down. I went back to work. I ran cable. I stayed at cheaper places and better places, and I put the chair under the knob and I told the story maybe twice to guys on a job site, and it landed as a spooky story. That's creepy, man. And then somebody would talk about a bear or a girlfriend and it would move on, because that is all it was to anybody who was not standing on my side of that door. A man was friendly to you and then he tried your door and then a car came and he left. It is not much of a story. I know that. For a long time I was not even sure, in the deep part of the night, whether I had made too much of it, whether the maybes had been right after all, and I had run from a lonely man in a parking lot and cost myself a night's rent over nothing. That doubt is its own kind of haunting. You want it to have been real so that you were not a coward, and you want it to have been nothing so that the world is the size you thought it was, and you cannot have both, and mostly you just stop looking at it. Then it was February. I was on a job outside Spokane, a big, cold warehouse, and it was lunch, and I was in the break room, which was a trailer with a microwave and a coffee maker and a television bolted up in the corner that somebody kept on the local news with the sound low. I had a gas station burrito going around in the microwave, and I was cracking my knuckles one hand at a time, watching the little plate turn, not watching the television, when the anchor said something about an arrest and a name, and I looked up because the guy next to me said, "Jesus, look at this." They had a photograph on the screen, a booking photo, and it was him, older on the screen than I remembered, or maybe just lit worse, the flat gray light of a jail camera. But it was him, the soft, heavy face that did not catch on anything, the face I had seen, huge and warped in a peephole with his hand on my knob. They had him under a name I had never heard, one of several the anchor said he had used. and they were saying he had been arrested at a rest area off the interstate in another state, and that he was being charged in connection with 4 separate murders across 3 states. Over the past 24 months, travelers, people passing through, people whose cars had trouble, people at cheap motels off the highway who were there one night and gone, and that investigators believed there might be more. They were asking anyone who had encountered the man to come forward. And there was a number on the screen, and there was that face, and I stood in that trailer with the microwave beeping and my burrito done, and I could not move. For over 24 months. While I was putting a coil pack in a Ford in a parking lot and telling myself a lonely man knew a lot about trucks. While I was building my maybes as fast as I could build them so I could sleep. He had a rest stop and a highway and a friendly nod, and he had done it 4 times that they knew of. And one of those 24 months was the October I stood in room 19 with my hand flat on a door that would not have held, and the only reason my name was not one of the ones they read on the news was an old couple in a sedan coming home late and getting out of their car 100 feet away, not knowing, never knowing, that they had reached across a parking lot in the dark and pulled me back from something. The anchor kept talking. They put up a map, the states, little markers where they had found the 4, and the markers were all the same. Off the interstate, near an exit, cheap places, travelers, cars with a little trouble. People who stopped for a night because it made sense, because $200 was $200, because the tow at midnight cost more, because every single choice had been a reasonable choice. I looked at those 4 markers on the map on a television bolted to the wall of a break room, and I understood that I had been looking at a picture of myself, at 4 men or women who had done exactly what I did. Gotten off at the exit, taken the last room, been friendly back to the friendly man, and built their own maybes as fast as they could build them, and had not had an old couple in a sedan. That is the only difference between me and the map. There is no other difference. I have looked, and there is no other difference. The guy next to me said something about how you never know, they walk among us, and he took his lunch out of the other microwave and sat down. I did not tell him. I never told anybody in that trailer. I wrote the number down off the television on the back of a receipt, and I went out to the parking lot, and I sat in my truck, and I called the tip line, and I gave them the incident number off the card that was still in my glove box. Incident 21449, and the town, and the Motel 6 off Interstate 90, and the woman on the line got very quiet and very interested and said someone would call me, and someone did. A different detective from a task force this time, and I told it all again. The coil pack, and the baby, and the heater, and the knob, and this time nobody had to wonder if I was making too much of it, because now they had 4 graves to measure it against. I do not sleep with the light off. I have not since. I still crack my knuckles. I still put the chair under the knob, and my brother still calls most nights, and sometimes his daughter, who is walking now, babbles at me through the phone, and I think about how that man knew about her before I had said one word to him about anything, how he stood in a parking lot in the dark and gathered up the small facts of my life like a man picking up change off the ground, patient, in no hurry, because he had all the time in the world and knew it. They caught him. I want to say that gave me something, and it did. It gave the families of those 4 people something, a name and a courtroom and an end. But it did not answer the thing that keeps me up. Because the man they caught was not the reason I am alive. He did everything right from where he stood. He was patient, and he was quiet, and he was friendly, and he had the room number and the empty unit beside me, and the van nose out, and he tried the door, and by every measure of his craft, I should have been the 5th. I am not here because I was smart or brave, or because the law was fast. I am here because 2 people I never met came home from dinner at the wrong hour for him and the right hour for me, and their headlights swung across a parking lot, and a man who did that 4 times decided that once, that night, was not worth the risk. That is the whole thing I am left holding. Not that he was caught, that it was that close, and that thin, and that I never even knew, standing at that door with my hand pressed flat against it, telling myself it was nothing, that the difference between the story I am telling and the story they would have told about me was a stranger's headlights and the length of a chain that would not have held.